Welcome to Novel Love Hearing. We bring you hundreds of novel audiobooks covering every genre and every kind of story you can imagine. Action? We've got it. Adventure? Absolutely. Horror? Of course. Whether it's the legendary Uchiha Massacre or outrageous tales like stealing Naruto's and Sasuke's women, you'll find it here. From epic series like One Piece, Bleach, Fairy Tail, and Hunter x Hunter, to countless other adventures, our library has it all. Love novels but don't have time to read? No worries, just plug in your earbuds, sit back, and let the story take over. Good listening, and happy hearing. Chapter 1 Survival in Desperate Situations. Lin Yi tightly covered his head. He vaguely remembered that he was fighting alongside his men against a rival gang. Suddenly, there was an explosion, the roar of gunfire, and pain struck him. His last memory was of staying on a hospital bed. But now, how did he find himself lying in a dark and dusty basement? Lin Yi's vision gradually recovered from blindness, and he slowly directed his gaze outside the window. In the distance, the silhouette of the Eiffel Tower came into view. Yes, this was still Paris. But to be precise, this city had already turned into ruins. There was no sight of the usual traffic jam on the streets, only charred and damaged car wrecks. Some residential buildings were either destroyed or burned down. Most of the structures were barely standing but lifeless, clearly indicating that the destruction was not caused by bombing. Who the hell did this? Lin Yi spat. He looked around. The room he was in was already in shambles, with equipment either broken or nowhere to be seen, clearly having been looted. Lin Yi looked out the window again, only to see a large group of people dragging their heavy steps, walking in a certain direction, their appearances utterly bizarre. Lin Yi struggled to get up from the hospital bed but nearly fell. He looked down and was surprised to find himself holding a baseball bat. Lin Yi smiled bitterly. At this moment, he was completely naked in a foreign land that had just suffered a terrible disaster. He needed to get out and see what was happening. Lin Yi opened the door and cautiously peeked out. Unexpectedly, there weren't mountains of corpses in the hallway, just a few shocking bloodstains and some fragments of equipment with unknown purposes. After peeking into several other rooms, Lin Yi confirmed that this hospital had been completely looted. As he walked along the hallway, he noticed a door that was perfectly intact, secured with a chair, clearly intending to trap something inside. Lin Yi hesitated for a moment but dismissed the thought of exploring what was behind the door, continuing down the hallway. After all, getting inside would mean risking his naked and half-frozen body. Who could have expected? The door beside him suddenly creaked open slowly. Lin Yi stood frozen in place, not daring to make a sound. A doctor walked out of the ward. To be precise, he was a doctor during his lifetime, but now a chunk of flesh was missing from his face, and half of his internal organs were gone. Seeing the doctor's horrific appearance, correlated with the group of people dragging their feet on the street and the tragic scene of the city, Lin Yi finally pieced together all the clues in his mind. This is the fucking apocalypse. Don't look this way, don't look this way. Lin Yi mentally screamed, his eyes fixed on the doctor with half his face missing not far away. The doctor slowly turned his head, his eyes hollow and lifeless, like those of a dead fish. Lin Yi instantly realized things were not looking good. Sure enough, upon discovering his prey, the doctor let out a howl and rushed straight towards Lin Yi. With urgency, as if eager to perform an operation on Lin Yi. How the hell are you running so fast? Lin Yi shouted. He had assumed he would encounter the traditional slow-moving zombies, but this one was exceptionally agile. In merely a moment, Lin Yi could feel the putrid stench with an acidic bite surging upon him from behind. You asking for it? Lin Yi abruptly spun around, twisting his waist and relaxing his hips. With a crack, the sound of bone shattering echoed in the hallway. Lin Yi mustered all his strength, swinging the baseball bat fiercely at the doctor's head. The doctor fell to the ground, but Lin Yi felt a rending pain in his palm. Come on, stand up. Stand up. Lin Yi twisted his neck, undisguised fury in his eyes. Looking at his feet, the zombie doctor trembled as it slowly rose from the ground. Lin Yi cleverly used gravity and his weight, repeatedly swinging the baseball bat at the doctor's head. Ding. Suddenly, a strange sound echoed in Lin Yi's mind. Congratulations. You have entered the survival game. By using the system weapon to kill a zombie, you have reached level 1 and received a random reward. Then, another message appeared before him. Do you wish to claim your reward? Yes or no? Yes. Lin Yi paused and thought to himself. The message disappeared instantly, replaced by a roulette made up of 6 icons spinning before him. The icons were a book, a sword, a potion, money, experience points, and a red circle with a slash through it. Stop! Lin Yi shouted. The roulette gradually slowed down, with the arrow slowly moving towards the red mark. Congratulations. You have learned shelter skills. This world is doomed to be destroyed, but maybe you can survive a while in your shelter. Enjoy it. Shelter skills? Before he could react, a loud cracking sound came from behind. The next moment, the iron door of the ward behind Lin Yi was blown open with a bang. A giant female zombie, over 2 meters tall and grotesquely terrifying, broke through, followed by about a dozen ordinary female zombies. Evidently, it was the fierce male scent on Lin Yi that attracted them. Escape. Despite the unbearable soreness, Lin Yi forced himself up, desperately sprinting down the hallway. Whoa! The female zombies let out extremely longing howls. The leading giant female zombie also growled lowly, its greedy gaze as if ready to devour Lin Yi alive. While running, Lin Yi encountered all sorts of undead, but each time he managed to sprint past them before they could react. Those zombies could only moan in disappointment, watching helplessly as Lin Yi, bare-bottomed, frantically swung his legs in an alternating manner, sprinting down the hallway. Lin Yi fled through the floors, searching for a way downstairs. Finally, he saw a glimmer of hope and sprinted towards the stairs. But just then, a filing cabinet suddenly flew over his head and slammed against the wall with a bang. It was the giant female zombie. It kept swinging its arms, hurling objects towards the walls around Lin Yi. Fortunately, its aim was really terrible. At this point, only about 3 meters of distance remained between Lin Yi and the stairs. The female zombies still pursued relentlessly, seemingly on the verge of capturing Lin Yi's fresh, delicious, naked body with their decaying hands. Shelter. Activate the shelter. Hide in the shelter. Lin Yi's heart raced to the limit. He gave it his all, thinking of activating the special skill he just gained. However, whether it was the wrong command or something else, no matter how he shouted, nothing changed around him. The female zombies were close, getting closer. Lin Yi couldn't help but glance back. The leading giant female zombie was already within arm's reach. It opened its mouth, spewing out a putrid stench, its discolored fangs dripping with nauseating slime. Behind it was a swarm of female zombies, surging forward, their twisted limbs moving in eerie postures. Lin Yi could even feel their fetid breath spraying on the back of his neck, the cold and revolting sensation making his hair stand on end. Damn it, enter the shelter. At the moment when the female zombies were about to touch him with their sharp nails, Lin Yi finally guessed the correct command. In an instant, he was transported to a clearing in the woods. Overcome by the unbearable pain, he lost consciousness. Unaware of how much time passed, when Lin Yi slowly opened his eyes again. It was already a sunny morning. Chapter 2, Let Me Be a Farmer? Is this my shelter? Lin Yi sneezed and, upon waking up, felt a sharp pain in his head and ribs. He turned over, allowing the sun to warm his half-numb buttocks, and eventually rose comfortably. He glanced around and found himself on a green clearing in the middle of a forest. Nearby was a tent, with a hammock hanging between 2 poplar trees. Under a makeshift shelter was a table with a laptop and a radio on it. Not far from the tent was a spring, where water gushed from the ground, forming a small pond. On the other side of the clearing was a bottomless pit. Curiously, Lin Yi threw a stone into the hole and waited for more than a minute but never heard it hit the bottom. Lin Yi found a military backpack under the table, containing 10 cans of stew, 5 liters of water, a flashlight, a Swiss Army knife, a lighter, and a folding shovel. He happily finished the canned meat, rested for a while, and then opened the laptop. There were several icons on the desktop, an icon with the word mail, marked with the number 3, indicating 3 unread emails. An Excel document named Income and Expenditure. An application file named Package. And an icon called Shop. Lin Yi clicked open the mail and found 3 emails titled, Welcome, Item Received, Level Upgrade. He opened the first email. Reply, Welcome, congratulations on acquiring the shelter. This shelter exists in another dimension, and you are its ruler and deity. Currently, the shelter covers an area of 8,000 square meters. Many ways exist to expand it, including through the shop. If you bring items from the real world into your shelter, you will gain experience points. Once you accumulate enough experience points, the shelter will level up. Each time the shelter levels up, its functions will enhance. You can also gain experience points by bringing survivors back to the shelter. P.S. If you bring 2 identical items into the shelter, you will only gain experience points for the first item. Reply, Item received, the shelter has received the system weapon. Baseball bat, and gain 10 experience points. Reply, Level upgrade, congratulations. The shelter has reached level 2. As a reward, you have received a bag of special potato seeds and a small plot of land. You can claim the reward in the package. Potato seeds? Are you kidding me? Do I look like a farmer? Lin Yi scoffed disdainfully and reached out to open the package on the computer. Then, he saw a picture of a bag of seeds and a small plot of land appear on the list. Lin Yi clicked the potato seeds button, and in the next moment, a bag of seeds appeared on the table. He read the planting instructions, which stated that with watering from the spring, It could fully grow in special soil within 72 hours. Lin Yi put down the seeds and clicked the special plot of land, as if playing a game. He found a suitable spot not far from the pond and then initiated the placement. In an instant, rows of small wooden fences burst from the ground, enclosing a plot of 50 square meters. And then? Where's the plant button? Plant it yourself. Lin Yi was immediately furious. Make me a gang leader, a farmer? You think you can get away with this? However, after a whole night's toil. Calm down, stay calm, first survive. How many are out there fighting desperately for a bite to eat? Lin Yi grumbled discontentedly, finally throwing the shovel aside. He rubbed his sore back and watered the field with spring water before finally looking at the farm. Planted crop, special potatoes, planting effect, 100%, watering effect, 100%, time until harvest, 79 hours 56 minutes. Seeing the condition of the field, Lin Yi fell asleep immediately. He was utterly exhausted, waking up on a hospital bed before his body healed, having to flee for his life and farm. This truly wasn't the life of a gang leader. 3 days passed in a flash. During this time, Lin Yi kept resting, occasionally giving himself massages, trying to bring his sore muscles back to normal. The canned meat ran out yesterday, and with his stomach growling from hunger, he headed toward the garden. The sight before his eyes made him light up. The potatoes were vibrant, the entire small plot of land like a green ocean. He gently turned over some soil and was delighted to find many fist-sized potatoes hidden within. Lin Yi quickly dug out some potatoes, using the resources at hand, using the bucket as a pot, setting it up on a pile of stones, and picking up some branches to start a fire. During this process, he further discovered the miraculous properties of the pond. The water in the pond had powerful self-cleaning abilities. Virtually any foreign impurities would be instantly removed. Whether used for washing potatoes or bathing, the water could purify quickly. Moreover, the water could not only be drunk directly but also quickly heal wounds and accelerate plant growth. Delicious. Lin Yi cooked the potatoes with their skins. After eating one, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. The potatoes were so delicious they made him insane. It seemed they could also instantly restore some physical strength. He ate an entire half bucket, finally feeling satisfied. After eating and drinking enough, a wave of fatigue came over him again like a tide, and Lin Yi fell asleep once more. This sleep lasted until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. However, just as he woke up, a message from the system instantly shattered his good mood. Warning. The crops in small plot number 1 will begin to rot in 12 hours. What? Why didn't you tell me sooner that these crops would rot in the ground if not harvested? Lin Yi glared angrily. He didn't care much at all, ran straight to the garden, with only one thought in his heart, to dig out every potato. Square meters of land seemed not large, but for someone with sore muscles, whose waist and back were almost unable to straighten, it was no small feat. Late at night, Lin Yi, naked, swung his shovel, tirelessly digging up potatoes, ignoring both meals and sleep, using up the last bit of strength. He was drenched in sweat, his muscles burning with pain, his whole body as limp as a wet rag. Lin Yi had a tenacious spirit that was admirable, continuing to dig in the soil under starlight. Who knows how much time passed? Bam. Lin Yi sat down on the soft soil. Done it. Looking at the pile of potatoes in front of him, Lin Yi felt an indescribable sense of accomplishment surge within him. In just this 50 square meters of land, he actually harvested nearly 800 pounds of potatoes. Hey, not bad at all. A hint of a smile appeared at the corner of Lin Yi's mouth as he closed his eyes and fell asleep. The next morning, Lin Yi was as hungry as a mad dog. He gulped down food while checking the condition of the land. Land status, ready for tilling. Lin Yi picked out some small potatoes to be used as seeds to plant. After a round of busy work, he looked at the pile of potatoes and began to ponder where to store this food. Suddenly, inspiration struck, and he quickly went to the computer, opened the store option, and indeed found a construction category. A simple cellar, composed of a layer of wooden shed, can be used for storing food. Food stored in the cellar will never spoil, with a storage capacity of 10 tons. The price is 200 coins. Wait. Coins? Where can I get coins? There's a sell option. What? 2 pounds of potatoes for a coin? Don't I have to sell half of the harvest? Screw you, you think you can dupe me like this? Selling how much? 400 pounds? Deal. Lin Yi turned and looked at the potato pile, finding only half remained. After purchasing the cellar, an idea struck, and all the potatoes were suddenly lifted as if by an invisible hand and were then instantly transported into the cellar. Another thought flashed through his mind, and the potatoes returned to the open ground, then were easily sent back to the cellar. After eating and drinking, it was time to go out and see the outside world. Lin Yi practiced repeatedly, quickly exiting and entering the shelter, finding that each exit position was the same as the entry position. After confirming that there were no zombies at the landing point in the real world, Lin Yi grabbed the baseball bat and left the shelter. By nature, he wasn't someone content with the status quo, and although he could choose to live safely in the shelter, he scoffed at it. He was the leader, past or present, and in this apocalyptic world, freedom always was his creed. Lin Yi cautiously looked around, confirming that the zombies had indeed left, before he began slowly heading towards the stairs. Now on the 6th floor, from the look of the lights and other equipment all turned off, it was clear that the power had long been out. This meant the elevator was unusable, so apart from jumping out of the window, the only way down was the stairs. Chapter 3, Arrival at the Louvre. Before taking action, Lin Yi was on the 6th floor of the hospital, using binoculars to survey. Nearby the Louvre, there seemed to be many military personnel and civilians. He suspected it was a survival camp, so he planned to find some clothes to wear and then go over to see if he could exchange some supplies and gather information. Now, he's rushing down the dimly lit staircase, each step kicking up a bit of dust. Suddenly, he stopped abruptly, his gaze firmly drawn to a figure by the railing. A woman was shackled to the railing with cold handcuffs, her legs were already mutilated, and her remaining torso and face were covered with terrifying scars, with skin and flesh rolled up. Seeing no immediate threat ahead, Lin Yi cautiously approached. Hearing footsteps, the woman let out a hissing sound from her throat, like a wounded beast's low whimper, her bony hands crazily reaching for Lin Yi. Although the handcuffs restricted her range of motion, it hardly stopped her desire for fresh prey. Free experience points. Lin Yi muttered to himself, with a sense of cruel indifference in his voice. Since childhood, he wandered the streets, lived among criminal gangs, and scenes of blood and death were not unfamiliar. For survival, he repeatedly hovered on the edge of life and death, his hands stained with much blood, and the rule of the strong preying on the weak was deeply imprinted in his soul. He tightly gripped the baseball bat, his arm muscles taut, and swung it forcefully. With a muffled sound of impact, the zombie-like woman's head tilted, completely lifeless. In these days of rest at the shelter, Lin Yi's physical strength gradually recovered, like parched land rehydrated with rain. You killed a level 1 zombie and gained 1 experience point, congratulations. You have reached level 2 and gained 2 attribute points, the mechanical prompt sounded in his mind. Lin Yi knew that for ordinary people, maximum attributes were about 10 points, and even a small increase in attributes could bring significant changes. Character attributes screen. He excitedly murmured, his eyes scanning the surroundings vigilantly. Level 2, experience points, 1 out of 10, attribute points, 2, endurance, 4 out of 8, magic value, 10 out of 10, power, 11, agility, 9, endurance, 8, vitality, 13, magic power, 10, skills, shelter. Lin Yi resolutely thought to himself, I want to put all points into endurance. As soon as the words were spoken, a warm current instantly spread throughout his body, slightly easing the fatigue, as if a new vitality was infused into his body. What's this? Lin Yi noticed 2 shiny survivor coins on the ground and something resembling a toy reward egg near the dead female zombie. He picked up the coins. Survivor coin worth 1 unit, Lin Yi thought it would save 4 pounds of potatoes, which was pretty worthwhile, so he directly transported them to the shelter. Then he picked up the toy-like reward egg object, and after observing it for a while, he crushed it, revealing a pair of small boots. His heart fluttered, and a pair of normal-sized orange leather hiking boots appeared in his palm. Leather boots, equipped to increase power by 2 points. Seeing the attribute description, Lin Yi eagerly wiped his feet on the zombie's clothes and put on the boots. Instantly, warmth and comfort enveloped his feet, and the weariness and pain of many days seemed to lessen greatly. Now, he finally had some clothes on. At that moment, 2 female zombies staggered out from the corner, dragging their feet, emitting blood-curdling howls. Come on, darlings. Lin Yi lunged forward, continually attacking the zombies. However, the story didn't end there. The zombies' howling was like a deadly call, attracting more of their kind. In the blink of an eye, 6 zombies surrounded him from all directions, some stumbling out of the doors, some jumping down the stairs, even breaking their bones in the frenzy to reach Lin Yi. Lin Yi tightly gripped the baseball bat, maneuvering around the narrow corridor to engage the zombies. He moved swiftly, dodging left and right, and struck fiercely when the opportunity arose. Soon, while fighting and retreating, Lin Yi escaped the hospital. He then shifted his focus to a 2-story middle-class residential house. Cautiously, he approached the house. He knew his strength well. He could handle 1 or 2 zombies, but when faced with a large group, he had to retreat into the shelter to avoid the attack, waiting for the zombies to disperse before striking or using stealth tactics. This hit-and-run strategy was one he had mastered as a child on the streets, and now, in the apocalypse, it's evolved into a survivor tactic of disappearing after killing the enemy. Upon entering the residential building, he first blocked the entrance to prevent more zombies from entering, and then began clearing the zombies inside. 7 zombies fell under his attack, dropping a total of 11 coins. After some searching, Lin Yi luckily found pants and a t-shirt that almost fit. Interestingly, the pants were bright yellow, and the t-shirt was bright pink. But in this resource-scarce apocalypse, having clothes to cover oneself was already fortunate. Luckily, he also discovered a hiking backpack and a pair of black leather gloves. He left the building and continued toward the Louvre, exploring and fighting along the way. Congratulations! You have reached level 3 and gained 2 attribute points, the system prompt sounded again. Lin Yi thought for a moment and decided to add the points to agility. He thought to himself, if you can't dodge attacks, high power and endurance won't help, agility is the key to staying alive. But before he could take a breath, a zombie with a lame leg, seemingly hardly movable, suddenly charged at him like an arrow from a bow. Its speed was astonishing. It agilely avoided obstacles, easily leaping over a car, its sharp eyes fixated tightly on Lin Yi. Damn! What kind of speed is this? Lin Yi's eyes widened, his heart racing to his throat, cold sweat pouring down. His mind went blank, with only one thought frantically flashing through, must hide quickly. He didn't hesitate to mentally command, enter shelter. Instantly, his figure vanished from the spot, appearing in the familiar shelter. He was now drenched in sweat, the shock brought by that fast-moving zombie still lingering. In this apocalypse, getting bitten by a zombie is nearly a death sentence. After calming his tense mood and cursing a bit, Lin Yi decided to check the store for items that could aid in his survival. After searching, he discovered a camera feature. He could use it to check the shelter entrance's situation, but the price of 150 coins made him hesitate. To gather enough coins, Lin Yi decided to target the potatoes. Now in the fields, the first batch of sprouts had emerged, but the harvest was still a while away. Frustrated, Lin Yi gritted his teeth and sold 300 pounds of potatoes to purchase the camera. Within seconds, the setup was complete, and the image of the shelter entrance appeared clearly on the computer screen. He operated the camera to start detecting 3 meters radius around the shelter entrance point. Surprisingly, the camera could pass through objects and the ground, checking for special situations. Lin Yi silently waited, only leaving the shelter after the formidable zombie disappeared. Seeing several abandoned cars parked on the road, and a few zombies lazily wandering in the distance. But nearby, there wasn't any immediate danger, and most importantly, that scary acrobat zombie was nowhere in sight. According to the watch taken from the zombie, it was now 4 in the afternoon. It was summer, and there was still some time before sunset. Lin Yi knew time was tight, and wearing this quirky outfit, he set off toward the Louvre. Along the way, he carefully avoided danger, occasionally encountering a few stray zombies, and he easily took them down. Finally, he arrived at the vicinity of the Louvre. The sight before him amazed him. The area had been transformed into a sturdy fortress, with police patrolling the magnificently built temporary defensive structures, and soldiers and military vehicles equipped with powerful weapons. Impressive. Lin Yi squinted his eyes. He thought that in such an organized camp, he might find what he needed, or gather some crucial clues for his development. Chapter 4. The woman in the tent. Lin Yi, wearing a pink t-shirt, steadily walked toward the entrance of the Louvre. It was sunset, and scavengers and hunters were all on their way back to the camp. A few foreign police officers were checking whether the entrants were infected and whether there was anything threatening to the camp in their belongings. Lin Yi calmly walked to the end of the line. He noticed that most of the scavengers were emaciated, and their backpacks were also deflated. Next. After waiting for an hour, it was finally Lin Yi's turn. Yo, a newcomer? From the east? The police officer in charge scrutinized Lin Yi from head to toe without restraint. A tall and healthy figure, conspicuous bright yellow pants, paired with an adorable pink t-shirt, donned with boots and gloves. This eye-catching attire made him resemble a hip-hop artist on stage. There were quite a few people from the east in the camp, mostly among the lower ranks of refugees. But looking at Lin Yi, the police officer had to admit that he was completely different from those refugees exuding a foul smell in the camp. His clothes and shoes looked quite decent, and his rosy complexion indicated he was well-fed, living comfortably in these post-apocalyptic times. The police officer glanced at Lin Yi's bulging backpack, and a hint of curiosity and greed flickered in his eyes. Please open your backpack and cooperate with our inspection. Lin Yi understood this was a procedure everyone had to go through. Without much thought, he placed the backpack on the inspection table and unzipped it. Inside were 3 cans of meat, 10 pounds of potatoes, and 2 bottles of mineral water. So much meat, staples, and pure water? The foreign police officer's eyes widened instantly. He had been guarding here for a whole month and had seen a single scavenger with such supplies before. But up until now, only Lin Yi had retained this much supply. His exclamation attracted the attention of other police colleagues and the people queuing behind. In an instant, everyone's eyes were focused on the food on the inspection table. Their breathing suddenly became rapid. Clap, clap, clap. 3 crisp knocking sounds suddenly rang out. Everyone's gaze shifted to Lin Yi. They saw him, at some point, pull out a baseball bat, gently tapping on the inspection table, while his sharp eyes scanned each person present. The zombie blood and brain matter stains on the baseball bat were intimidating enough to deter anyone from meeting Lin Yi's gaze. "Can I go in now?" Lin Yi stared intently at the foreign police officer. "Of course, please enter." The foreign police officer plastered a smile on his face. "Our camp is deeply honored to accept a strong professional like you." "Professional?" Lin Yi silently noted this term in his heart and then took a step into the louver. At this moment, the vast square inside the louver was crammed with countless tents. Each tent, no bigger than 2 square meters, housed at least 2 or 3 people. These people were either enduring hunger or suffering from illness. Everywhere, there were people lying on the ground, either on the brink of death or already dead. Lin Yi shook his head. The smell permeating the camp was like the stench from a kitchen drain, foul and nauseating. "Big brother. Do you have any food? I beg you. My sister hasn't eaten for a week. I'm willing to trade myself for anything edible, please." A woman suddenly emerged from a corner, clutching Lin Yi's pant leg with her frail arms. Lin Yi ignored the woman's pleading gaze and began scrutinizing her. This was the first Eastern woman he had encountered since waking up. She wasn't particularly beautiful and quite thin, but she seemed very resilient. "Please." The woman pleaded again, this time in the Asian language, and begged repeatedly. Several days had passed since he woke up, and he had already been shocked by the apocalyptic scene. He should also adjust his mindset properly. "Okay." Lin Yi nodded. "Really?" The young woman was ecstatic, looking up at Lin Yi. There were women more charming than her in the camp, especially since being Asian put her at a lower status. Now, all the most beautiful women stayed in the louver, willing to do anything for food. The conditions there were much better than those outside, and they could even take baths. It was said. Currently, all professionals or useful people lived in the louver. The rest were forcibly pushed to the perimeter of the square, left to fend for themselves. Some brave individuals might venture out for food, but most never returned. Lin Yi followed the woman to a small tent where a little girl was sitting. "Sister, go sit outside and cover your ears. Don't take them down until I say so, okay?" The woman smiled brightly. It seemed that to her, the little sister was the most important thing in the world. "Okay, sister." The little girl was about 6 years old and looked quite grubby as well. She seemed to know what was about to happen but held back her grievance, barely forcing a smile before obediently leaving the tent. Lin Yi watched the girl squatting outside, covering her ears with her small hands, and then began to inspect the tent. It was a one-person tent with a sleeping bag and some personal items inside. The space was extremely cramped, slightly cramped for one person, let alone housing 2 people. A minute later, the people in the other tents nearby turned their heads in shock. Even though they were used to such sounds, they were still amazed by the volume and intensity of this particular noise. In this post-apocalyptic world, survival is the first priority, and this remaining pleasure is considered a luxury. Having no strength left due to hunger, where can one find the energy to do anything else? About an hour later, Lin Yi stopped. The woman was exhausted, breathing heavily, and he thought it best to let her rest a bit. From the woman's sunken cheeks, it could be deduced that she hadn't had a proper meal for at least 2 weeks. Lin Yi rummaged through his backpack, taking out 2 already cooked potatoes and adding a bottle of water, placing them in front of the woman. "For me? Really?" The woman could hardly believe her eyes. She knew she wasn't worth so much. At least on this camp's periphery, she'd never seen a woman worth this much food. She hesitated to glance at Lin Yi but cautiously took a small bite. Immediately, her eyes lit up. This was real food, and it was hot. She had never tasted anything so delicious. Tears welled up and overflowed as she hoarsely called for her sister. Lin Yi walked out of the tent, went not far away, stretching as he kept an eye on the woman's direction with his peripheral vision. Once he was sure the woman and her sister had finished their potatoes and weren't disturbed, Lin Yi continued toward the louver. Lin Yi was no saint. Giving food away for free was impossible, but trying to take back food he gave out was even more impossible. After walking about 100 meters, Lin Yi encountered another checkpoint. This time, the number of foreign police officers was at least 6 or 7 times more than outside, and each held a gleaming weapon in their hand. As soon as Lin Yi approached, he was stopped. Chapter 5, Trading Market. Stepping into the louver area, guards approached, requesting to check belongings to confirm eligibility for entry. Facing the guard before him, Lin Yi calmly unzipped his backpack. The leading guard, seeing the backpack full of food, showed a surprised expression. Without conducting a detailed search, He gestured for Lin Yi to enter. Entering the interior of the Louvre, the overall environment was relatively tidy. The purpose of each room had been replanned. Although it was no longer a mere museum, compared to the crew tents outside, it was undoubtedly much more spacious and comfortable. Parts of the area had been converted into storage rooms, barracks, and dining halls, among other functional places. In the corridors, armed guards patrolled closely. Looking up, a giant floor map was hanging on the wall. Strictly speaking, it was actually a sheet with a map drawn on it, marked with many inscriptions and annotations in French. Lin Yi's gaze quickly scanned the crowd, soon stopping a somewhat sleazy-looking patrolling guard. "Excuse me, can you help me with something?" Lin Yi asked with a smile. "I don't." The sleazy guard was about to refuse but changed his tone instantly when he saw the meat can Lin Yi handed over. "I'm free." "What do you need?" The inside of the Louvre was bustling, and wanting to thoroughly understand all the information was indeed not an easy task. Rather than blindly exploring on his own, it was better to find someone well-informed to sift and relay useful information. During the conversation, Lin Yi could clearly feel the guard's dissatisfaction with the current situation through his expression and tone, yet he was helpless to change it. According to him, refugees were settled in the outer regions of the Louvre, while the lower floors inside housed soldiers and skilled professionals. The upper floors, however, were exclusive residences for officials and other prominent figures. The living conditions there were excellent, with ample food supply, no work required, and no need to risk their lives by going outside. The first floor was divided into several different areas, such as a women's court, marketplace, barracks, and living areas. The second floor stored weapons and supplies and included medical rooms and other essential facilities. Higher floors were for VIPs. Additionally, there was a group known as the professionals, specializing in hunting zombies. "I'm not a professional. If you want to know more, you can go to Section 6 on the second floor to find the commander. Or you can look for Professor Curie. He used to specialize in vaccine and professional research, though without much success." "What is the commander mainly responsible for?" "He oversees all professionals in the camp, plans supply missions, and develops strategies to distract zombies." "Distraction strategies? What does that mean?" "He regularly assigns personnel to lure zombies away from the camp and then organizes teams for extermination." The sleazy guard clicked his tongue, then whispered to Lin Yi, saying that the commander was extremely cautious with his life, never leaving the camp and spending all his time in the women's court. "Thank you," Lin Yi smiled at him. No wonder he chose this informant. He was greedy for small benefits yet provided valuable information, a true treasure among chatterboxes. Watching the guard walk further away, Lin Yi put away his smile. Analyzing the guard's words, it wasn't hard to conclude that this camp was pretty much rotten to the core. Ordinary people struggled to survive under the threats of disease, hunger, and zombie infection. Yet the so-called elite enjoyed all the comforts of life without bearing the responsibilities they should before obtaining those privileges. It seemed that the camp's plan was simply to wait it out, hoping that zombies would either starve or leave on their own. Even holding on to a sliver of unrealistic hope that other military forces might send troops for rescue. At this moment, a clamorous sound of footsteps came from ahead. A fat man was seen surrounded by many beautiful women, arm in arm, frolicking down the street, followed by a squad of soldiers. From his triumphant expression, even if he didn't consider himself an emperor, he certainly saw himself as at least a prince. "This place is beyond saving, might as well make the most of it." Lin Yi's lips curled into a cold smile as he headed towards the trading area. Silencers. Homemade silencers that can save your life in a critical moment. Only a limited stock left. 3 bullets for 1, you can't find a better deal. Flour. Fresh flour, come over here to buy it. Just 2 bullets. This is a genuine Rolex. As Lin Yi stepped into the trading market, he found it even more bustling than he expected. Skilled craftsmen were showcasing their skills at stalls, while those scouring for supplies were eager to liquidate their miscellaneous items. Lin Yi stopped at one stall, with a rough-looking man as the vendor, currently resting with his eyes closed. "Is that a sword? A system-dropped sword?" Lin Yi pointed to a sword on the stall and asked. Hearing the inquiry, the vendor slowly opened his eyes. When he saw the customer was a flamboyantly dressed Easterner, a trace of impatience flashed across his eyes, and he waved his hand as if shooing a fly. Lin Yi ignored the man's attitude, focusing his attention on the system sword. In that instant, information that only a professional could see appeared before him. Basic one-handed sword, level 2. This sword was slightly stronger than a starter baseball bat and could easily deal with a regular zombie's head with one swing. But be careful when using it, as it's still dangerous enough to harm yourself. Lin Yi tossed his starter baseball bat onto the stall. "How much more do I need to pay?" The vendor was visibly taken aback. He glanced down at the blood-stained end of the bat, then looked up at Lin Yi for a second before averting his gaze, shifting uncomfortably. Give me 200 rounds of 5.56 caliber bullets, or 40 pounds of food. In this camp, food and bullets served as common currency. Typically, 1 pound of food equaled 5 rounds of 5.56 caliber bullets. 9mm bullets were slightly cheaper, with 1 pound of food exchanging for 7 rounds. Deal. Lin Yi didn't say much more, taking out some potatoes he had prepared for trade from his bag. The vendor was taken aback once more. So straightforward, so understated. Though an experienced merchant, he rarely encountered someone who could offer 40 pounds of potatoes at once, let alone someone ready to part with an equivalent amount of bullets. He had sold out all his miscellaneous goods today, and was resting while selling this one-handed sword, more out of a hopeful whim. But he never expected. And the buyer didn't even haggle. Here are your 6 bullets as change. The vendor respectfully handed over the change as Lin Yi carefully inspected the weapon. Where did you get these weapons from? Reward eggs, but the drop rates for these things are getting lower and lower. Lin Yi looked down at his shoes, which were also items dropped from reward eggs, and seemed to have realized something. Boss, see if you need this. The vendor pulled an item from his coat. Vaccine bracelet, level 1, this bracelet contains a level 1 vaccine. Once bitten, the vaccine will automatically inject. 1 dose can resist 1 bite but is ineffective against zombie levels higher than level 1. Remaining doses, 1 out of 4. How much? Lin Yi's heart raced upon seeing the bracelet. This was a life-saving treasure. 4 pounds of food? The vendor's tone was a bit uncertain, as the price he quoted was noticeably high. Lin Yi noted the hint in his expression but had no time to waste here, as the item was crucial. He circulated around and indeed did not find any stall selling similar items. This vaccine bracelet was practically a lifeline. Without it, being bitten once would be the end. But with it, at least one could get bitten twice. Additionally, the mention of zombie levels in the bracelet's description caught Lin Yi's keen interest. He recalled the limping zombie he encountered before reaching the louver, capable of making high leaps. Surely, its level was well above level 1. Once he leveled up, he definitely had to go back and settle the score with it. As darkness fell, Lin Yi decided to postpone the rest of his plans to the next day. He scanned the trading market for a place to spend the night. Soon, the inviting women's court captured his attention. Chapter 6, Shelter Upgrade. On the first floor of the louver, there was a women's courtyard. Next to the women's courtyard, there was an inn offering overnight services. The space inside was barely 5 square meters. It was as small as a coffin. Lin Yi put his sword into the shelter, then rummaged through his backpack to find a potato. The potato looked bizarre, twisted in shape, with several bruises. He casually placed the potato on the table, slung his backpack over, closed the door, and walked toward the women's courtyard. At that moment, his inner agitation hadn't fully vented, and his spirit was still high with no signs of drowsiness. Entering the women's courtyard, Lin Yi was somewhat surprised. Several burly white men were pacing around, maintaining order. The guests were hurrying along, each busy with their own affairs, and no one even glanced at Lin Yi's trendy outfit. Not bad, really not bad. Lin Yi couldn't help but marvel. Beautiful women were in abundance, with all skin colors and types here, more captivating than the girl he had seen outside. However, on second thought, in this zombie-infested apocalypse, if one isn't a professional or lacks survival skills, these beautiful women seemingly can only rely on their looks to survive. Lin Yi scanned the crowd with his eyes and finally fixed on a blonde girl with curls. Her legs were long and slender, and she looked about 25 years old. Even without makeup, she was quite a beauty. Her figure was slim, likely unintentionally shaped by long-term hunger. Here, an hour of service required a payment of 1 bullet. Lin Yi fished out 2 bullets from his pocket and handed them to the girl. The girl pouted slightly, forcing a faint smile. She realized he wasn't the kind of man who could be done with in 10 minutes. The rooms in the women's courtyard had walls lined with soundproofing material, surfaces uneven like discarded foam boards, appearing somewhat strange. On the table were lots of small gadgets, some looked interesting, others brutal. However, Lin Yi wasn't interested in these side paths. Lin Yi didn't bother tracking time. In any case, after paying twice, he walked out of the room contentedly. This trip also brought him some rather intriguing information. Ordinary men might only last 10 minutes in there, but professionals were quite different. With their bodies' attributes enhanced, their endurance often surpassed normal people. On the second floor, there was a special women's courtyard set up specifically for professionals. The women there were all professionals too. The madam would bring in zombies with severed limbs and have the girls finish them off to gain experience points. Although the experience gained from killing zombies with external assistance was much less, they could still level up to 2 or 3 this way. Moreover, To better cope with those lust-driven professionals, the girls put all their attribute points into endurance. Returning to the room, Lin Yi found the potato on the table missing as expected. He leisurely went out, found a patrolling guard responsible for this area. Something was stolen from my room. The guard glanced at him contemptuously, coldly said, "I didn't see anything," and then turned away without a backward glance. It seemed tonight he still had to return to the shelter to sleep. Lin Yi touched his chin, pondering to himself. The guard's reaction made him realize that although the louver seemed well patrolled, it was actually only superficial. Thus, whether it was the trade market or other areas, there was ample room for maneuver. Lin Yi closed the door and entered the shelter. After adjusting the camera's angle, he yawned and fell asleep. Until the next day, the alarm clock on the table rang ding-dong, waking him reluctantly from his dreams. On the way to the louver, he raided numerous items in various residential buildings. Regardless of usefulness, he dumped them all into the shelter. After all, as long as the shelter collected items not previously recorded, he could gain the corresponding experience points. After washing up, Lin Yi leisurely roasted a few potatoes and ate them with chili sauce. At that moment, the shelter's laptop indicated a flood of emails. Subject: Received items. The shelter has received a Samsung washing machine. Experience points increased by 6. The shelter has received a woolen blanket. Experience points increased by 2. Emails like these numbered around 20, resulting in the shelter gaining a total of 62 experience points. Subject: Level up. Congratulations, your shelter has reached level 3. You can now invite survivors to your shelter. The store offers options for shelter expansion and new item selections. Subject: Level up. Congratulations, your shelter has reached level 4. The store's item selection has been updated, and you've also received a reward, a bag of special cabbage seeds. Subject: New task, new faces, invite at least 2 survivors to your shelter. To invite survivors, formulate a set of rules for your shelter. The only limit is your imagination, and send it to email nongfuzongshan30 with the subject My Shelter Rules. Rewards: shelter experience points, money, survivors. Lin Yi excitedly clenched his fist. Great. Ha ha ha. Lin Yi smiled wide at the potato field, smiling like a child. Who was he? He was the boss. He always remembered his identity and tirelessly worked towards it. Now, he finally saw a small return for his efforts. From now on, he could find a few subordinates to work for him, no longer having to tire himself out in the fields. Suddenly, like lightning, inspiration surged in Lin Yi's mind. He quickened his pace, dashed to the computer like the wind, and his fingers danced madly on the keyboard, starting to draft the shelter's rules. As a few lines appeared on the screen, Lin Yi's lips curled into a sly grin. The rules seemed simple, but their intricacies could easily push other survivors into a dire situation akin to ancient Roman slaves. With a click of the mouse, he sent the meticulously edited document to the designated email. Then, he turned on the camera and began reviewing the footage from last night in the in-room. The time was frozen at 1:50 a.m. The room door was slowly pushed open, and a teenager wearing a cool night vision goggles cautiously crept in. The boy looked vigilant, scanning the whole room quickly. Finding no one inside, his gaze soon fixed on the corner backpack. He quickly approached, rummaged through the backpack, and found nothing, his face immediately showing panic, and hurriedly left the room, not forgetting to shut the door. Indeed, his judgment was not mistaken. Lin Yi put on a pair of bright yellow pants, a very trendy pink t-shirt, and boots that enhanced his fashionable presence. Swish, he left the shelter. Just reaching the corridor, Lin Yi saw the cop responsible for this area, his eyes wide open like copper bells. The officer must have received feedback from the teenage thief from last night, knowing there was no one in the room back then, yet now a living person suddenly appeared. How could he not be surprised? Lin Yi calmly walked to the front desk and paid for another night's stay, spending his last bullet. Next, he planned to first find 2 survivors to join the shelter. Then, he would find that so-called Professor Curie to listen to his research, to see if it could be for his benefit. As for the 2 candidates to join the shelter, he already had clear ones in mind. Chapter 7, The Struggle of Women Leaving the Inn. Lin Yi departed from the Louvre and headed straight back to the refugee camp in the square. As soon as he stepped into the camp's vicinity, a stench mingling sweat, germs, and rotting meat assaulted him, making him frown deeply. After what happened last night, Lin Yi knew that if he pulled out potatoes from his empty backpack for trade again, it would surely arouse others' suspicion. So he planned to temporarily leave the camp, pretending to be out scavenging for supplies. But before that, he had to find the person he needed first. Just as Lin Yi arrived at the square, the refugees swarmed around him anxiously like a tide. Some knelt and bowed, while others tried to barter themselves, all desperately begging him for a bite to eat. Lin Yi, annoyed by the entanglement, glared fiercely at the crowd. After scaring off a group, he then calmly walked towards yesterday's single tent. At this moment, the tent door was open, and the woman was telling a story to her younger sister. Seeing Lin Yi appear again, she first looked astonished, but quickly became panic-stricken and fearful. "Ah. Why are you here? If it's about yesterday's potatoes. We've already eaten them," the woman said, instinctively shielding her sister behind her. "Do you want to leave here?" Lin Yi's tone was calm yet carried an undeniable authority. "Leave? Go where?" The woman didn't react at first, but in a moment, her eyes widened and brightened. Around the louver, those in high positions periodically doled out leftover scraps to refugees to ensure the survivors wouldn't die easily in the camp. But they used filthy river water to cook soup, and the meager ingredients were mixed with plenty of sand and wood shavings. The few things that could be considered food were mostly expired or already starting to rot. Currently, the infection range of dysentery in the camp continued to expand, and it was only a matter of time before it would break out on a large scale. Nowadays, people lost their lives daily due to hunger and disease, and crimes were rampant, yet the guards turned a blind eye to it. For her and her sister, staying in this place was undoubtedly a death sentence, differing only in who would die first. In such utter desperation, someone suddenly offering a helping hand felt like a dream to the woman. She gazed up at Lin Yi, scrutinizing the man before her. At least in the tent yesterday, she was too shy to meet his gaze. This man possessed the handsome features typical of Asians, the robust build akin to Americans, and the generosity similar to Europeans. He seemed trustworthy. Though the only thing she couldn't quite admire was his trendy style of dressing. "All right." The woman nodded vigorously. Lin Yi was slightly taken aback, not expecting her to agree so readily, without even basic questions about where they were going, showing no caution at all. "I'll take you to a place where potatoes are planted," Lin Yi softly told the woman. "There, you need to behave first, then work hard to exchange labor for food and a stable life." "All right." Upon hearing of a potato plantation, the woman's excitement was hard to conceal. She understood that, at least, she secured a job in this apocalyptic world that everyone dreamed of. A long-term stable food source. After all, here, even if she was willing to trade herself, no one was willing to give her even a bit of food. Rumor had it that children had recently started disappearing. Suddenly, "Pack your things," Lin Yi said after finishing and walked out of the tent. The woman was swift, quickly dismantling the tent and packing all her belongings into a large backpack in no time. It was evident that before the apocalypse, she must have been quite adept at housework. Lin Yi didn't intend to help, nor did he carry the large backpack for her. He now had to be responsible for the safety of 3 people. Once the woman was ready, the 3 headed to the nearest checkpoint. Passing the checkpoint, a foreign policeman mocked, "2 fewer mouths to feed, hee hee." Another policeman chimed in, "I'll bet a buck that the man will definitely sell the women or use them to lure zombies." Lin Yi and the others stopped. To be exact, it was the woman who slowed down, causing him to stop. Looking back, the woman clearly heard the policeman's words. She tightly held her sister's hand, showing a look of struggle and hesitation on her face. Lin Yi remained patient, understanding that her decision was crucial to her and her sister's fate, so he respected her cautiousness. He could give them a bit of time, but not much. The woman gritted her teeth, her palms sweaty. She had heard of the cruel methods of professionals. These strong ones would take naive refugees away from the camp. They then led them to certain places, breaking their legs to use them to lure zombies, repeatedly exploiting them. She even had seen non-professionals pretending to be professionals to do such deeds. They found various excuses to deceive numerous refugees outside, some sold to cannibals, others sent to harems, and more used as cannon fodder and bait. When a refugee gets thrown in front of a zombie, they would naturally try to run, thus attracting more zombies. After the refugees diverted the zombies, the professionals could scour the area without any hassle. As for the refugees, their ultimate fate was only death. In the apocalypse, a human's life wasn't even worth the bullet needed to end it. Time was up, and without a word, Lin Yi turned and left. The woman was startled, taking a deep look at the camp before pulling her sister and tightly following behind. "Hey!" The foreign policeman wanted to say more, but Lin Yi suddenly turned back, glaring fiercely at him. The policeman was so frightened he shivered, instinctively shrinking back, swallowing the words he was about to utter. By the roadblock on the street, Lin Yi leaped to the top of a car, scanning the area. On the street, only 3 zombies were wandering aimlessly. "Wait here. I'll deal with a few zombies and be back soon," Lin Yi said softly. He let the 2 girls, one big and one small, hide behind a big truck, then flipped over the roadblock himself, ready to collect experience points. The shelter's one-handed sword instantly appeared in his hand, with a blade sharp and easy to wield. With a gentle swing, the zombie in front of him was instantly cut in half. These few zombies wandered sporadically down the street. Dealing with them one by one wasn't a challenge for Lin Yi. After killing the last zombie, Lin Yi took the woman and her sister to the residential building he had previously looted. At this moment, the woman appeared extraordinarily anxious. She realized that Lin Yi had brought them to a residential building but saw no potatoes or any sign of fields. She was extremely uneasy. Images of herself and her sister being bitten by zombies involuntarily flashed through her mind. "What are you thinking?" Lin Yi interrupted her thoughts. I need you to sign a contract," Lin Yi said earnestly, looking at the woman. "To enter the shelter, you must sign this contract." As soon as the words fell, a contract visible only to the three of them floated quietly among them. What is this?" The woman was dumbfounded by the sight. She wasn't a professional and had never interacted with the system, making her especially shocked. "The content isn't long, take a good look. If there are no issues, just say I agree." The little girl too. Currently, it was still relatively safe here, and Lin Yi was willing to give the soon-to-be residents of the shelter a bit of time. Moreover, he didn't want to force anyone. He needed people who willingly worked for him, not those who would resist or half-heartedly comply. The woman took a deep breath and looked at the contract content. Chapter 8, Settling the Sisters. You have received an invitation to become a resident of the space-time shelter. Please carefully read and familiarize yourself with the rules of this shelter. If you agree to the following rules, please say I agree, and you will be transmitted to the shelter. Note that the owner of the space-time shelter is its king and absolute ruler. As a shelter resident, you have the right to have a place to live, obtain food, receive protection. You are prohibited from touching the boss's belongings, engaging in conflicts with other survivors, damaging the shelter, terminating the contract. You need to obey all orders given by the boss. Other matters, this contract can be changed at any time. Without the boss's permission, you cannot leave the shelter. If you agree to all terms of this contract, you will be automatically transmitted to the space-time shelter. Say I agree, little sister. After reading the contract, Chen Yui softly said to her sister. The sisters successively uttered that sentence of decisive significance. As soon as the words were spoken, they were instantly transmitted to the shelter, located in an open space not far from the potato field. Moments later, Lin Yi also appeared beside them. "This is?" Chen Yui asked in confusion, unable to stop herself. "This is the space-time shelter I created. Here, there is no threat from zombies, clean water sources, and plenty of food. But to survive, you need to work hard." While speaking, Lin Yi pointed to the fields in front of them. "I can work. Definitely. As long as it keeps my sister from hunger, I'll do anything you ask," Chen Yui eagerly assured. "What's your name?" "I'm Chen Yui, and this is my sister, Chen Lingling." Chen Yui responded, pulling the little girl beside her to the front. "Alright, Chen Yui, I'm Lin Yi, but from now on, you should call me boss." Lin Yi looked at the somewhat desolate shelter, laughing as he continued to speak. "You are the first batch of residents here, but soon others will join." In his mind flashed the scene of 100 slaves sweating and working hard in the fields, involuntarily laughing like a child. At this moment, the system's notification sounded. "Congratulations, you have completed the new faces task, and have received a reward. The shelter earned 10 experience points and 100 coins. You must be hungry, let's go eat." Lin Yi looked at the system panel, feeling particularly pleased. He led the sisters to the cellar. The cellar was chillingly cold, causing Chen Yui and Chen Lingling to rub their hands together. But as soon as they saw hundreds of pounds of potatoes piled up like a mountain in the cellar, fierce hope ignited in their hearts. So much food. They will no longer have to go hungry. Lin Yi casually took some potatoes, washed them by the spring, then cooked them on an open flame with their skins. The sisters had not tasted such food for too long. Initially, they were a bit shy, each holding half a potato, nibbling slowly. After finishing what they had, they claimed to be full. However, upon hearing Lin Yi encouraging them to eat freely, within just 5 minutes, Chen Yui had already picked up the 7th potato, still devouring it ravenously. Lin Yi was very satisfied with this. After all, people who can eat usually can endure hardships and have strength to work. After a hearty meal, Lin Yi led the sisters to the edge of the potato planting field. This is a special field where potatoes only take 3 days to mature. Lin Yi introduced. 3 days? Chen Yui was astonished, hardly believing potatoes could mature so quickly. But suddenly she realized she was not in the real world. Moreover, Lin Yi is a powerful professional, having such magical abilities seemed unsurprising, so she quickly accepted it. This batch of potatoes can be harvested in 2 days. Your task is to weed the fields and, when the potatoes are mature, you are responsible for digging them out, Lin Yi said, handing the potato planting manual to Chen Yui. After harvesting, follow the instructions in the manual to plant more potatoes in the field, understand? Understood, Boss. Rest assured and leave it to me. Chen Yui excitedly responded loudly. Harvesting potatoes from such a small plot of land every 3 days and planting them hardly seemed difficult work. At that moment, she felt as if she were in a dream, not only having a safe home, a stable food source, but also not burdensome work tasks. And all of this was thanks to the man in front of her. Don't be too happy too soon, crops mature quickly, and naturally spoil quickly too. You have only 24 hours to complete the harvest. Typically this small plot can yield 900 pounds. Wow! That's a lot. Although Chen Yui did not know how much a square plot of land normally yields, to be safe, she decided to express surprise. After all, this man in front of her decides the fate of herself and her sister. She must work hard to please him, so he is satisfied, ensuring the sisters can live better here. You can first pile the harvested potatoes here, I'll find time to put them in the cellar. Lin Yi explained expressionlessly. Now he somewhat considered himself a boss, and based on experience, he felt it necessary to maintain a certain distance with subordinates. Thus it maintains his authority while making it easier to manage them. It's okay, I can. Chen Yui hurriedly spoke. She worried the boss might think she's lazy, needing him to personally transport the crops would certainly make him look down on her, so she must find ways to increase her value in the boss's eyes. Lin Yi made a gesture, directly interrupting her. He first pointed to the pile of potatoes in front, then waved his hand lightly. The potatoes instantly disappeared, and upon reappearing were neatly stacked in the cellar. I am the ruler here. Lin Yi meaningfully reminded Chen Yui, then took her to the laptop. Try clicking the mouse a couple of times. Chen Yui sat at the table, but as soon as she touched the mouse or keyboard, a message popped on the screen, access denied. Seeing this scene, Lin Yi felt assured. This laptop is the key tool to controlling the shelter, evidently, only he has access permissions. From now on, without my permission, neither you nor the little girl are allowed to touch anything on this table. Lin Yi said, pointing to a pile of miscellaneous items not far away, where smartphones, clothes, furniture, electronic products, and various other items were stacked. These were collected in advance for gaining experience points, but until now he hadn't had time to organize them. If you feel bored, you can find some toys to pass the time from there. Anyway, settle down first, I have to go out to work. Alright. Chen Yui blinked. Lin Yi focused his mind, and his figure instantly appeared in the real world. The residents of the building had united to turn the apartment building into a small fortress. The doors and windows were tightly sealed with metal, and even armed guards were closely monitoring the surrounding area at the windows. Lin Yi silently noted this location, then proceeded to the next apartment building. The aim of this outing was to thoroughly loot every place he could find for resources to accumulate more experience points for the shelter. Now the shelter was beginning to show value, but Lin Yi's ambitions went far beyond this. With continuous looting, Lin Yi gradually distanced himself from the looter, encountering more and more zombies along the way. Once, he even saw an advanced mutant zombie leading a group of minions, frantically hunting a group of refugees. The scene was like a bloody slaughter, unbearable to watch. During the journey, he also noticed many apartment building roofs hung with bedsheets inscribed with SOS, clearly people trapped inside issuing distress signals. Lin Yi even saw a clever child. The child used a rope to pull the door to create noise to attract zombies, and when zombies approached upstairs, he slid from the 5th floor using another rope. Unfortunately, he evidently overestimated his arm strength, failing to endure and crashing down when he reached the 3rd floor. Initially, seeing these scenes, Lin Yi felt touched, but gradually, he became numb. He directly entered a residential building with relatively few zombies, focusing on earning experience points. Only to see him wielding his sword, assassinating, movements flowing smoothly, and in just a few strokes, 6 zombies were felled by his sword. With several short system notification sounds, he harvested 6 experience points and 7 coins. Ding dong. The crisp notification suddenly rang. Your shelter has leveled up. Chapter 9, Go take a bath. First night had fallen, and Lin Yi decided not to rashly take risks. During this operation, he reaped great rewards, not only gaining 19 experience points and 15 coins but also collecting various sundries worth 48 experience points for the shelter. Apart from successfully upgrading the shelter, he himself also progressed to level 4. Lin Yi allocated the newly acquired attribute points to endurance and agility, raising these attributes to 13 and 14 respectively. Boss. You're back. Lin Yi's first employee, Chen Yui, shouted with joy. What have you been busy with all day? He asked. I sorted through that pile of stuff, Chen Yui said as she pointed to the heap of sundries. Lin Yi looked in the direction she pointed and saw furniture, various items, and small gadgets neatly categorized. Clothing was folded by season and style for easy access, electronics were neatly placed on custom shelves to prevent damage, Even the small gadgets were cleverly arranged into an interesting shape. Looking at the refreshed scene, Lin Yi appreciated Chen Yui's meticulousness, acknowledging her more. Beautifully done, quite impressive. Lin Yi cast an approving glance at Chen Yui. Previously, he hadn't considered categorizing the items and had just piled them up randomly. But seeing these organized useful items significantly improve the quality of life, he couldn't help but smile. Seems I've found a good slave. Good employee. Thank you for the compliment, boss. Chen Yui couldn't be happier upon hearing Lin Yi's praise. Lin Yi let Chen Yui continue her tasks while he walked to the laptop to check the new rewards from the upgrade. Topic: Level up. Congratulations, your shelter has reached level 5. The store inventory has been updated. You can now purchase additional land. Store. Build. Land. They want 100 coins? Why don't you just rob me? Lin Yi gritted his teeth, re-evaluated, and reluctantly clicked the purchase button. He placed the newly purchased land next to the original potato field. Instantly, the side of the fence slowly retracted into the ground and then began extending outward, securely enclosing the 2 special fields. What are you planning to do? Lin Yi asked as he saw Chen Yui heading towards the fields with a shovel. I plan to till the new land, Chen Yui replied. She was very clever and, after seeing the boss ponder in front of the first piece of land and then add a fence and a field, she immediately understood it was time to get to work. It's too late now, let's do it tomorrow morning. Lin Yi appreciated Chen Yui's resourcefulness and diligence. Okay, boss. Chen Yui responded with a sweet smile. She originally worried that the boss might require her to work 24 hours continuously. Now it seemed she was overthinking, and she breathed a sigh of relief, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction and happiness. Hold on. Lin Yi called after Chen Yui, who was about to leave, and pointed towards the pond. Go take a bath first. But bathing will dirty the pond. Chen Yui responded awkwardly. She knew well how dirty and smelly she and her sister were, looking quite shabby. Don't worry. Even if you poop in there, the pond will turn clean again in a second, Lin Yi said earnestly. All right. Chen Yui responded in a low voice, looking more embarrassed than before. With Lin Yi's permission, she shyly picked up disposable bathing supplies and ran with her sister to the pond. Turning back, she saw Lin Yi already tucked inside his tent, sound asleep. Chen Yui pursed her lips and then, with her sister, fully enjoyed the rare refreshing bath. This was their first bath in months. She freely used soap and shampoo and played in the pond with her sister cheerfully. Strangely, when they emerged from the water, the pond indeed turned crystal clear in a second. The next morning, sunlight poured over the shelter. What's going on? Lin Yi was awoken by strange noises. What are you doing? Your job is tough and dangerous, so I'm helping you relax, boss, Chen Yui said, pausing what she was doing. She blinked her big eyes, looking dazed. Hiss. Great. Keep going. Lin Yi certainly wouldn't refuse such good fortune. Moreover, he was truly exhausted, so a little relaxation was not unwelcome. Thus, he closed his eyes again. The morning forest was stunning. Lin Yi stretched lazily in front of his tent and then sat on the grass, enjoying Chen Yui's frolicking in the pond. A hearty breakfast, some spring water, and a bath later, Chen Yui looked renewed. Her figure was still slim, and compared to the time of hardship, she appeared more capable now. Previously, it hadn't been obvious, Lin Yi squinted, pondering to himself. Chen Yui's face now looked more charming, though not a top beauty in the world. Her bare-faced appearance could compete with pre-apocalypse internet celebrities who used beauty filters. Her long black hair cascaded down like a waterfall onto her soft shoulders. This scene stirred something in Lin Yi. He approached Chen Yui. Boss? Chen Yui gasped, surprised to be embraced from behind by strong male arms. It's all right, boss. The woman breathed quickly. Afterward, she limped towards the campfire to prepare breakfast, while Lin Yi began his morning exercise. After breakfast, Lin Yi packed up, confirmed through cameras that the site was secure, and returned to the real world. He targeted an apartment building with an ISO sheet hanging from the window. Along the way, everything was eerily silent, with collapsed buildings and abandoned vehicles scattered everywhere. Moving cautiously and alert for possible dangers, Lin Yi fortunately didn't encounter any zombies upon entering the building. Arriving on the 4th floor, there was only one metal door, tightly locked with faint sounds emanating from behind it. Lin Yi raised his hand and knocked on the door. Who's there? A young woman's voice full of tension and caution sounded from behind the door. A living person. Lin Yi responded concisely. Please help me. As soon as the words were spoken, the door suddenly opened, revealing a petite blonde girl with an innocent face standing before Lin Yi. There was no denying she was stunningly beautiful, with a flawless appearance and a graceful figure. My sister is in trouble, please, you've got to help me. I'll give you anything you want, just come in quickly. She spoke urgently, pulling Lin Yi's hand. Before Lin Yi could respond, the woman had already pulled him into the room. Chapter 10, Cannibals just dragged into the room by the blonde. Lin Yi immediately noticed a dark gun barrel steadily pointing at his head. Well done, Alice. The gun-wielding man was a burly Caucasian, his face twisted into a sinister grin. Your charm skills are absolutely stunning. As he spoke, one hand firmly gripped the gun, aiming it dead at Lin Yi, while the other suddenly wrapped around the blonde's waist, planting a disgusting kiss on her face. Charm skills? Lin Yi was startled and glanced at the blonde in astonishment. At that moment, a bizarre scene unfolded as the woman's appearance began to melt and collapse like a wax figure, her once graceful figure rapidly distorting. In just a few moments, she transformed into a plump, unattractive woman in her 30s. Turns out, this woman was also a professional, possessing special skills that could confuse men's minds. Meanwhile, noise erupted from several other rooms. Soon after, burly men carrying axes streamed in, their eyes gleaming with malevolence, staring at Lin Yi like hungry wolves. This guy's muscles look solid, this time, I want to eat his arm. One of the burly men licked his lips, almost drooling. Then I'll take the thigh, there's more meat there, and it'll be a treat. Another chimed in. I want a leg too, hee hee, the third leg. Someone else jeered. Lin Yi instantly understood that they were evidently a group of deranged cannibals. Their facial features were grotesquely distorted, eyes reflecting a brutal aura, and they emitted a nauseating stench of blood and rot. Lin Yi discreetly surveyed the surroundings. Suddenly, with a swish, his figure vanished like a ghost. This move was truly astonishing. Could he also be a professional? The previously ferocious cannibals suddenly widened their eyes, most recoiling in terror. Some panickedly swung their axes, desperately trying to hit the vanished prey. The gun-wielding man was both shocked and furious, roaring, he must be able to hide. Quickly, find him, kill him. Following his command, several bolder cannibals hurriedly ran to block all the exits. However, they overturned almost the entire building but found not a trace of Lin Yi, as if he had truly turned into air, completely disappearing. At this moment, Lin Yi was safely in his shelter, leisurely munching on a potato, while closely monitoring the outside activity through the surveillance cameras. Finally, Lin Yi felt the time was right. With a swish, the half-bitten potato floated in midair inside the shelter. His figure suddenly disappeared, reappearing behind the gun-wielding man the next second. Swoosh! Lin Yi moved as fast as lightning, swiftly swung his arm. The guy's head went flying. Whoosh! The commotion inside the room instantly alerted the other cannibals. They frantically rushed out of various rooms. Without even taking time to assess the situation, they crazily hurled their axes in Lin Yi's direction. Several who carried firearms fired wildly at the room with a burst of tu-tia-tia-ta-tu. When Lin Yi re-emerged from the shelter, the scene before him was already a chaotic, horrific mess. Most of the cannibals had turned into bloody, dismembered corpses. However, the ugly woman named Alice was surprisingly fortunate, only taking a shot to the neck. If it were an ordinary person, they would have long perished in such circumstances. Yet with the attribute enhancements of a professional, she was still painfully struggling in a pool of blood. Lin Yi slowly squatted down, quietly observed the woman before him, thoughtfully tidied her disheveled hair, gently tucking it behind her ear. Alice groaned, blood choking her, her eyes filled with horror suddenly turned to pleading upon witnessing Lin Yi's actions. She mustered all her strength, squeezed out a hideous smile, only to cough up more blood. Her voice barely audible said, I am yours now. Lin Yi raised an eyebrow, slightly surprised, not expecting her to still try to use her charm skills in such a desperate situation. Admittedly, in her charmed state, she was stunningly beautiful. Lin Yi had never seen such a beautiful woman before. Lin Yi smiled, with a swift motion of his hand, her charming head rolled down to accompany the gunman's head. The woman died incredulously. She was originally the leader of the cannibal gang. Despite many past failures, she always managed to come back after surrendering to the victors or seeking an escape. Afterwards, she would quickly rebuild the new gang of cannibals using her professional skills. Then she could once again use her skills to charm and hunt targets, eventually devouring them. After all, who would suspect this seemingly innocent beauty to be a cannibal serial killer? Lin Yi stretched lazily. Inadvertently doing a good deed? That really doesn't suit his style. Fortunately, the professional gangs typically had some valuable items. Lin Yi grinned, began searching the residential building. In one room, he discovered a metal bathtub containing a nearly fully devoured corpse, with a pot of meat soup beside it. Another room was a shared bedroom, storing some supplies and other useful items like ropes, knives, axes, and more. Additionally, he found 10 liters of gasoline, 20 liters of diesel, and many nice men's and women's clothing in some small rooms. For Lin Yi, a fully leveled scavenger satisfying the shelter's experience needs, he left nothing unexploited except the kitchen sink. After diligently gathering all the valuable items, Lin Yi left the residential building. In the next round of scavenging, Lin Yi encountered the largest horde of zombies he had seen thus far, over 10,000. At this scale, he couldn't handle it. Seeing the road ahead blocked, Lin Yi chose not to risk it. He planned to return to the Louvre to find Professor Curie while recruiting new residents for the shelter. After all, the shelter was in dire need of people. He had to recruit more useful individuals to strengthen his power. Nowadays, the zombies were increasingly strong and gathering, and if he didn't develop quickly, he'd eventually be eliminated. Stop. What are you here for? When Lin Yi entered the checkpoint, the foreign officer guarding it immediately shouted. Trade, overnight stay, find a woman. The foreign officer assessed Lin Yi from head to toe, noticing his yellow pants, pink t-shirt, and East Asian face. It was hard to see him as a decent person. Are you carrying weapons? The foreign officer asked. Lin Yi flipped a sword single-handedly, twirling it. Droplets of zombie blood dripped to the ground. Professional? The foreign officer murmured, roughly scanned the items in Lin Yi's backpack, then decisively chose to let him through. After entering the checkpoint, he only walked a few steps. After entering the checkpoint, he only walked a few more steps. Lin Yi frustratedly pondered, where did Professor Curie live again? For a moment, he just couldn't recall. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the checkpoint. That's robbery, you can't just take from us. An Asian voice sounded. Lin Yi turned his head and saw an oriental pair of twins loudly arguing with a foreign officer. No weapons allowed in the camp, according to regulations. I must confiscate it. The foreign officer snarled. It's for exchanging food with Professor Curie, you can't take it. Cried the more mature-looking youngster, persistently making supplicating gestures. The foreign officer ignored all that, intent on taking the gun. Give it back. We'll sell it to someone else. Shouted the wilder twin, stepping forward, trying to reclaim the worn-out handgun from the foreign officer. What? Are you crazy? The foreign officer roared, raising his arm, about to deliver a blow. The two teenagers shut their eyes tightly, necks retracting. Yet the pain they imagined did not come. Instead, they heard a voice filled with magnetism and authority. These two are my friends. Chapter 11, do you want to leave this place? These two are my friends. That professional from earlier? The foreign cop looked at Lin Yi, his eyes full of vigilance. Lin Yi glanced at the twins and asked, is there a way to resolve this peacefully? The brothers were very quick-witted. Seeing the situation, they immediately ran behind Lin Yi, as if he was their lifeline. According to the rules, we must confiscate the firearms and arrest those who violate. Before the cop could finish, Lin Yi took out a tempting-smelling canned meat. The cop took the can, and his originally stern and serious expression softened a lot instantly. However, deep down, as an enforcer of the law, being challenged by refugees, especially two Eastern kids, was undoubtedly a huge insult. So, he remained stern-faced and said coldly, I can overlook their assaulting an officer, but... Lin Yi didn't let him finish and brought out another equally delicious canned meat. A glimmer flashed in the cop's eyes, and he subconsciously reached out to take it, but this time he couldn't succeed. He was shocked to find that the canned meat seemed firmly welded between Lin Yi's two fingers, and no matter how much force he used, he couldn't pull it out. Feeling toyed with, the cop was instantly furious, tilting his head up aggressively. But the moment he made eye contact with Lin Yi, it was as if a sharp light pierced through him. That feeling was like suddenly being burned by something scalding, making him instantly avert his gaze. Damn it! The cop cursed internally, his heart uncontrollably racing. Suddenly, he felt his hand lighten, and the canned meat was firmly in his grip. Alright, but if this happens again, they'll have to be bait for the zombies. The cop evaded Lin Yi's gaze and threateningly addressed the air beside him. Can I rent that gun? Lin Yi asked calmly. 3 minutes later, Lin Yi entered the Louvre Square refugee camp with the twin brothers. After a conversation, Lin Yi learned the twins' names. The older one was Dchuan, and the younger one was Ziaxuan. They were once students of Professor Curie. Do you know where Professor Curie lives? Dchuan scrutinized Lin Yi for a long time, his eyes filled with hesitation, before slowly nodding. Then, Dchuan led Lin Yi to a small, dilapidated tent. It was then that Lin Yi finally understood why the brothers risked everything to bring guns in exchange for food. Inside the tent was only one person, a dying old man. He was emaciated to the bone, like a mummy, with bruises all over his body. This person is a professor? Lin Yi found it hard to believe. Those thieves not only stole the professor's leftovers distributed by the camp but also beat him up. Ziaxuan clenched his fists tightly. Dchuan hurried to the old man's side to check on him, Stop talking, the professor is faint from hunger. This young man seemed extremely proficient in handling such situations and quickly assessed the old man's condition, even able to perform simple first aid. It's good that he's alive. Lin Yi opened his backpack, took out some cooked potatoes, and a bottle of water. You three should eat something too, and wait here. I'll go buy some stuff. After giving these instructions, Lin Yi headed toward the marketplace. The handgun he got from the foreign cop had an empty magazine. So, Lin Yi went to the market and exchanged 20 pounds of potatoes for 150 rounds of 9mm ammunition. When he returned, Professor Curiel still showed no signs of waking up. Lin Yi looked to the corner of the tent, where there was half a potato and a half bottle of water remaining. He hadn't brought much food. This amount was certainly not enough to fill the brothers. But they still left half of it, clearly intending to save it for their teacher. Do you want to leave with me to a safer place? But the brothers appeared somewhat hesitant. My time is limited, decide quickly. Lin Yi's tone brooked no argument. Okay. Soon, the twins made their decision. Lin Yi gestured for them to start packing Professor Curiel's belongings. The tent was piled high with all sorts of books and documents. Lin Yi realized he couldn't return to the shelter with all these items without arousing attention. So, he left Dchuan and Xiaoxuan to carefully sort and pack the professor's things. Once everything was packed, Xiaoxuan was loaded with backpacks, while Dchuan carried fewer but still needed to carry the unconscious Professor Curiel on his back. Can you manage? Lin Yi had to ensure everyone's safety, and couldn't assist, so he asked. The brothers understood, and Xiaoxuan even smiled confidently, signaling that the weight was no issue, as they had obviously done a lot of physical work before. The foreign cop at the checkpoint clearly knew about someone like Professor Curiel. However, they also knew that the so-called professor had no achievements in vaccine and professional research, so they didn't care about his departure. Lin Yi took the old man and the two youths across the checkpoint smoothly. When reaching the barricade, Lin Yi called the group to a halt and began scouting the situation. Below the barricade, a small group of staggering zombies were wandering around. Lin Yi casually picked up a stone and threw it forcefully. Once the zombies heard the stone hit the ground, they immediately lunged toward the sound. Lin Yi swiftly drew out his one-handed sword, his figure flashed, instantly closing in on the zombies. Then, Dchuan and Xiaoxuan widened their eyes, full of astonishment and bemusement. They watched as Lin Yi weaved through the zombies, his movements smooth like flowing water, dispatching the zombies as effortlessly as slicing through vegetables. Bro. Did you see that, bro? Xiaoxuan was so shocked he could hardly speak. At this moment, Dchuan couldn't respond, similarly fixated on Lin Yi, his eyes filled with awe. They weren't unfamiliar with seeing professionals hunt zombies, on the contrary, the brothers often ventured out to scavenge supplies and almost daily witnessed professionals dealing with zombies. But the performance of this man was truly different. Usually, weaker professionals would use refugees as bait and then slip away to gather supplies. Stronger ones would first use various tactics to disperse the zombie horde before taking them down one by one, and even then, they'd need to pause for breath intermittently. But what was with this guy? Gather the zombies together first and then launch a massacre? In less than 3 minutes, Lin Yi finished the battle and returned to them. Dchuan and Xiaoxuan glanced at the pile of zombie heads not far away, then at Lin Yi's calm demeanor, swallowing hard. In an instant, their previously shocked gazes turned fervent. The brothers realized they had met a real master. Lin Yi silently counted in his mind, there were 18 zombies in total, and after the battle, he had obtained 14 coins and a reward egg. He casually crushed the reward egg, revealing a pair of black gloves, which, when worn, boosted his agility value by 2 points. Not bad. If someday, I could assemble a complete set of equipment, I wonder what the effect would be, Lin Yi thought to himself. Then, he led the brothers through the city to the abandoned apartment building he had visited a few days ago. Is this your base? Xiaoxuan asked uncertainly. Of course not. Come inside. I'm very hungry and feeling like a woman. Lin Yi led the two youths inside the apartment and to a room on the second floor. Then, he closed the door, locked it, and slowly looked at the brothers. His sharp gaze, like that of an eagle, made Dchuan and Xiaoxuan shiver involuntarily. This man had brought them to this apartment building, locked the door, and he even said he wanted a woman? The twins couldn't help but feel a chill down their spines, deeply apprehensive. Chapter 12, Shelter Newcomer. First, take a look at this contract. Lin Yi stretched lazily and waved his hand, causing the contract details to appear clearly in front of the twin brothers. As a resident of the shelter, you have the right to have a place to live, receive food, obtain protection. You are prohibited from touching the boss's belongings, having conflicts with other survivors, damaging the shelter, terminating this contract. You need to Obey all orders given by the boss. Other matters, this contract can be modified at any time. Without the boss's permission, you must not leave the shelter. If you agree to the terms of this contract, you will be automatically transported to the shelter. The brothers stared blankly at the contract, only coming back to their senses after a long time. Brother, do you think we should agree? Xiaoxuan asked with a hint of hesitation in his voice. It says we'll have a place to stay, food, and protection. It's much better than staying in the Louvre refugee camp. Chuan analyzed. You're right, but this way, we're basically no different from his slaves. Our days in the refugee camp were not much different from being slaves, and there was no protection or food. The brothers fell silent all of a sudden. They exchanged a glance, seemingly reaching an unspoken agreement, and then said in unison, I agree. As soon as the words left their mouths, they heard a pleasant female voice from not far away. Are these the new members? Hey, I saw her at the Louvre refugee camp. She's one of those starving people, Xiaoxuan whispered to his brother. Weird, look at her now. She definitely doesn't look like she's starving. Chuan studied Chen Yuiu carefully, his voice full of confusion. She looks, really beautiful, more so than any women inside the Louvre. The brothers, just in their early 20s and full of youthful vigor, couldn't take their eyes off such a pretty girl. At this moment, Lin Yi also appeared in the shelter. He yawned and pointed at Chen Yuiu, telling Chuan and Xiaoxuan, she will help you get familiar with the shelter environment, teach you how to work, and handle various daily tasks. Before returning to his tent, he specifically reminded Chen Yuiu to take good care of Professor Curie, ensuring nothing happens to the professor, as he might turn out to be very useful later on. After saying this, he went into the tent and fell asleep quickly, until he was awakened by the noise outside. Ouch! It's crushing my foot, it hurts so much. Brother. This iron thing is so heavy. Lin Yi groggily got up and realized it was already 5 p.m. Reluctantly, he exited the tent, only to see the brothers, Chuan and Xiaoxuan, struggling to carry a large washing machine, panting heavily. He turned his head to look at the originally empty space, where most of the items collected to earn shelter experience points were now neatly sorted. He clearly remembered that before he went to sleep, those clutter was piled up like a small mountain, disorderly and chaotic. It seemed these brothers were really good workers, putting in considerable effort. Boss, you're awake. Lin Yi turned around and saw Chen Yuiu's radiant smile. She had changed into a new outfit, wearing black jeans and a white short-sleeved shirt, with a few top buttons left unbuttoned, showing a fair and graceful appearance. Boss. We've encountered a small problem here. She hesitated, stopping mid-sentence. Speak freely. Lin Yi stretched lazily, starting to loosen up his muscles. We have only one shovel now, and we lack many tools for weeding and watering. Got it. Write me a list, and I'll figure out a way to get the items. Let's eat first. Lin Yi said while patting his empty stomach. It turned out that Chen Yuiu was indeed an excellent housekeeper. Her meals were delicious, laundry efficient, and the shelter was well cleaned inside and out. At the dining table, Lin Yi put a spoonful of stewed potatoes and meat in his mouth, the flavor bursting on his taste buds, making his eyes light up. He turned to look at the Chuan and Xiaoxuan brothers, who were devouring their meals, as if this was the last meal of their lives. When the brothers realized everyone was watching them, they almost choked on their food. However, their carefree nature led them to just smile awkwardly at everyone and continue to mop up the food on their plates. Lin Yi smiled, always believing that hands that can eat are also good at working, and he liked such people. After dinner, Lin Yi exercised a bit and did a round of stretching. This would help him face various crises the next day. Currently, the camp had 5 tents, one for himself, one for the sisters Chen Yuiu, one for the Chuan and Xiaoxuan brothers, and one for Professor Curie, who remained unconscious. Early the next morning. Oh. Lin Yi was once again woken up by Chen Yuiu's affectionate gesture. He said nothing, fully enjoying it. He then indulged in a hearty breakfast, drank a cup of rich milk, and even luxuriously ate a few cookies. With his stomach full, it was time to work. He carefully checked the safety of the landing site through the camera before setting off for the real world. Boss, you must stay safe. Chen Yuiu instructed gently from a distance. Lin Yi nodded slightly in acknowledgement, grabbed the shopping list Chen Yuiu wrote the night before, and headed back to the abandoned residential building. He locked the residential building's door and stepped onto the street. Good morning, Paris. At this time, the air was fresh and the breeze was pleasant, with gentle sunlight casting on him. Since the apocalypse, the Earth's air had become much clearer, the once troublesome smog had dissipated, and even the ozone holes seemed to have closed. He walked along, instinctively checking the windows of the apartment building, occasionally catching glimpses of people trying to survive stubbornly in residential buildings. On the streets, He also saw many zombies trapped inside buildings, wandering aimlessly, banging against doors and windows, trying to break free to taste human flesh. Along the way, he gained only 3 experience points. Recently, he found that solitary zombies were becoming rarer. He had a vague premonition that maybe soon, the zombie groups would undergo some changes. Nowadays, many mutated zombies gathered into clusters, ranging from a few hundred to even thousands. Every time he saw such large zombie clusters, Lin Yi either immediately returned to the shelter or took a wide detour, never risking himself. Upon reaching the Louvre, Lin Yi saw many scavengers leaving their safe bases to search for spoils to support themselves and their families. He saw a group of desperate people, carrying large packages and with children in tow, planning to settle at the Louvre. Regarding their decision, Lin Yi made no comment. If he had to express an opinion, he'd only think to himself that their choice was too foolish. In his view, their chosen way of surviving was far more painful and difficult than becoming slaves in his shelter. After successfully passing through the checkpoint and refugee camp at the plaza, Lin Yi arrived at the trading market. He directly found the trader he often dealt with. Some of his previous supplies, including bullets, were bought from this trader. "Did you bring more food this time?" The stern-looking trader immediately recognized him by the pink t-shirt and bright yellow pants. "Help me get these items as soon as possible." Lin Yi handed the shopping list to the trader. Chapter 13, Tremendous Business Opportunity. What do you need this junk for? The merchant took a glance at the list, frowning. "I'm a farmer, can't you tell?" Lin Yi replied earnestly. "You? A farmer?" The merchant raised his head incredulously, sizing up Lin Yi. "With your trendy outfit, you don't look anything like a down-to-earth farmer. Are you rapping to me right now?" However, seeing Lin Yi's serious expression and his determination to get the farming tools on the list, and considering that he's a stable long-term customer, the merchant advised earnestly, "Since the apocalypse, the soil has long been polluted. Only a few crops can survive, and their yield and quality are very unstable. Are you sure you want to farm?" Upon hearing this, Lin Yi's expression changed slightly. The merchant keenly noticed the change in Lin Yi's expression and gestured seriously. "Many people have tried to solve this problem, but no one has succeeded yet. Even hydroponics doesn't work, the water is polluted too. Understand?" "Understood." Lin Yi nodded thoughtfully, lowering his head in contemplation. The merchant let out a sigh of relief, not wanting these seemingly trivial issues to affect their transaction. But just as he felt at ease, Lin Yi's next words raised his tension abruptly again. "What did you say?" The merchant doubted if he heard it wrong, asking uncertainly. "I said, I want 2 sets of everything on the list." Lin Yi pointed at the list, his tone as firm as a rock. The merchant was dumbfounded, eyes wide open, anger in his gaze. "Did my feelings get flushed down the drain? Didn't you hear a word I said? Suit yourself, come back in an hour for the goods." The merchant waved his hand helplessly, unable to persuade a stubborn ghost. "What is this used for?" Lin Yi placed a coin onto the table. He could get this kind of coin from killing zombies or completing any task in the shelter. They were scarce, and even very rare. But he had to rely on these coins to purchase the necessary construction for the shelter. The merchant glanced at it and gave an explanation. Upon hearing it, Lin Yi learned that every professional could get these coins, but their utility was very minor. They could buy various system items from the system's vending machines, weapons, equipment, skills, and even food. But the most critical issue is that the vending machine locations appear without any pattern, completely randomly, and usually they relocate within a few days. Whether you can find one depends entirely on luck. In short, although most professionals have this thing, it has no practical use, so its value is very low. At this moment, the light in Lin Yi's eyes made the merchant a little uneasy, causing him to subconsciously shift his position. "How much is food exchanged for coins worth?" Lin Yi asked. It's too hard to find these vending machines, don't count on finding one." The merchant tried to dissuade Lin Yi from this idea. "No matter how much food you have, don't waste it like this. Wouldn't it be better to recruit a few more girls? I run around everywhere, the odds are pretty high, quote me a price and let's see." Lin Yi smiled slyly, already calculating in his mind. This is a huge business opportunity. How many coins does selling potatoes to the system earn? But if the price is right in trading with the merchant, his profits could double instantly. Investing the profit back into production would be like a snowball effect, his growth rate would be immeasurable. "Why do you always buy such junk, what's the use?" The merchant was very annoyed, feeling that his cooperation with the other party was nearing bankruptcy and would soon be over. 2 coins for 1 pound of food. How about using 90 pounds of potatoes for 200 coins? Lin Yi said with a smile. "What? 90 pounds? The merchant was so surprised he stood up directly from his chair. Realizing many people around were looking this way, he quickly leaned closer to Lin Yi and lowered his voice, 90 pounds. Do you really have that much? He looked at Lin Yi with eager eyes. You go ahead and collect, I'll bring the food tomorrow. Now, hurry and prepare the items on my list. Lin Yi pointed back at the shopping list, gesturing for 2 sets, then turned and walked towards other stalls. Watching Lin Yi's departing figure, the merchant couldn't help but clench his fist excitedly and give a silent yeah. But then he realized his gaffe, quickly straightened his back, glanced left and right, and coughed awkwardly. Lin Yi wandered around the trade market. He didn't find any decent weaponry but did find a few vaccine bracelets. One of which still had 1 use left, and another had 2 left. Each bracelet required 2 pounds of food. Walking through the first floor of the Louvre, he didn't find anything interesting. However, when passing by the Women's Institute, a beautiful red-haired woman caught his eye, her striking looks instantly stirring his appetite. But he really had no time to linger now. It was a crucial period for his transformation from gang leader to business tycoon. Every step had to be cautious and error-free. Hence, he could only suppress his inner urge, swallow hard and return to the merchant to collect his goods. The batch of goods was packed into a large camping bag by the merchant, containing 3 folding shovels, a watering can, plastic buckets, a hoe, and various agricultural tools. Roughly estimated, they weighed several hundred pounds. But with Lin Yi's strength of 16 points, this was not a big challenge. After paying, he easily hoisted the backpack over his shoulder and left the Louvre. The refugee camp on the plaza was still the same. A group of hungry people surrounded Lin Yi, begging for food. Lin Yi pushed these hungry people away and quickly returned to the apartment building, then teleported back to the shelter. Boss, you're back. Chen Yui saw the boss return with a large backpack. Her face immediately blossomed with an excited smile. All the things you asked for are here. How's the harvest in the field? Lin Yi put down the backpack, rubbing his sore shoulders. It was quite heavy after all. All done, the kids did great. Not bad. Lin Yi nodded in satisfaction. Boss. Chen Yui awkwardly averted her gaze, speaking softly. What is it? Can we make some curtains or something? I don't want people watching me while I shower. She glanced at the twin brothers sorting electronics. Lin Yi nodded in agreement. This suggestion is very necessary and must be implemented quickly. It's not just those 2 young guys who struggle to control their gaze, even he, as an old uncle, sometimes finds it hard to resist. He still remembers, just this morning, indulging a bit in appreciating Chen Yui. Lin Yi indicated that in these matters, Chen Yui could arrange according to her privacy and plans. After all, he wasn't a heartless boss, he valued humanity and human rights. After the conversation with Chen Yui, Lin Yi turned to a giant poplar tree. There, a frail old man sat at a desk piled with books and documents, engrossed in research. Lin Yi squinted, only hoping he was worth the food he consumed. Moreover, the contract was still unsigned. Chapter 14, Blue-haired gang. Was it you who saved my old life? Professor Curie immediately recognized the man in front of him when he saw Lin Yi. He struggled to get up and bow to express his gratitude. Lin Yi didn't stop him and graciously accepted the respect before inviting the old man to sit down. You can just call me Old Mark, Professor Curie panted. He was from France, Curie was his surname, and Mark was his first name. Do you know why I saved you? Lin Yi looked at Old Mark. Because you think I have value? Old Mark answered firmly without hesitation. Eh? Lin Yi was somewhat surprised by this answer. This old professor had been working on various projects since the apocalypse broke out, but all of them ended in failure, which even led to his being ostracized from the Louvre to a refugee camp. If it weren't for Lin Yi's intervention, he'd probably be long dead by now. After all the setbacks and failures, he could still be this confident. Either he really had extraordinary skills, or he was just an overconfident fool. Value is something you have to demonstrate yourself. Lin Yi smiled and waved his hand, and some documents appeared on the table. Rebirth Clan. So, you're one of the gang leaders who snatched the data. Old Mark picked up the document, his hands trembling with excitement. As a biologist, he understood the significance of this document, as it was the greatest research project before the apocalypse, only accessible to the country's core. I know nothing about medicine, so I need you to quickly study this data. Lin Yi said, and with another wave of his hand, a contract appeared in front of the old man. Old Mark didn't hesitate, he had apparently understood the general contents of the contract from students before, and he quickly signed his name. After resting for about 2 hours, Lin Yi ate something to replenish his physical strength and then returned to reality to start scavenging for supplies and hunting zombies again. But shortly after, he sensitively realized that someone was following him. The person thought they could avoid being noticed by lowering their voice and communicating with accomplices through some device. Little did they know, Lin Yi could hear everything clearly and even determined from the quick clicking accent that the stalker was Russian. Headquarters, this is 6. The target just walked into the Menobrix 3 supermarket. Awaiting further instructions, over. The man tracking Lin Yi reported into a walkie-talkie. Received. Has he had contact with the blue-haired gang yet, over? Came the response from the walkie-talkie. I'm not sure, but it seems unlikely. I think he's gay, over. Lin Yi stumbled when he heard that, almost falling to the ground. Lately, too many people have misunderstood due to his flashy clothes. Xiaoxuan was like that initially, and now this stalker thought so too. He walked into the large supermarket full of helplessness. The inside of the supermarket looked worse than the outside. Trash was everywhere, the shelves were emptied, everything was destroyed, and the smell was extremely unpleasant. Not a single human or zombie could be seen. Fortunately, Lin Yi wasn't planning to scavenge for regular items this time. He first targeted more than 20 shopping carts, then the cash registers and store mannequins. Next, he started hauling shelves, refrigerators, freezers, and any objects not bolted down. However, he didn't take everything but selected a few of each item. After all, placing items in the shelter required space, and the same items only counted once for unlocking experience points at the shelter. Of course, he welcomed any items that could improve the quality of life. For instance, some inflatable dolls, although he might not use them, could be for his underlings. Without proper outlets for relief, problems could arise over time. Soon, Lin Yi had circled the entire supermarket perimeter. Just as he was about to check rooms inside the supermarket, a large door suddenly opened in front of him. Lin Yi immediately returned to the shelter, quickly approached the laptop, and opened the surveillance camera feed. The screen displayed 4 young hooligans, all with blue-dyed hair. They resembled mafia goons from the late 80s, riding motorcycles and causing trouble everywhere. Lin Yi thought for a moment and called Xiaoxuan over. The 2 brothers, like little underground rats, had witnessed many kinds of people and things while surviving in the cracks during the apocalypse. What's up, boss? Take a look at these 4 blue-haired guys. Do you recognize them? Lin Yi asked, pointing at the 4 on the screen. They're the blue-haired gang. Are you on their turf? Xiaoxuan's face turned pale with fright. Blue-haired gang? What kind of little-known gang is that? Where did they pop out from? I'd never heard of them when I was a boss before. They're professionals, but also a bunch of lunatics. They rob survivors everywhere, kidnap women, and even murder for fun, Xiaoxuan said, starting to tremble uncontrollably. So, it looks like they're either robbing survivors or looking for valuable supplies by appearing in the supermarket? Lin Yi carefully observed the 4 on the screen and noticed each had a baseball bat and a one-handed sword hanging from their waist, and one even had a handgun. Lin Yi pondered for a while, then suddenly smiled. Are you thinking about robbing them, boss? Xiaoxuan sensed the ominous smile from his boss, and couldn't help but step back instinctively. Kid, bring over a chair and sit. Lin Yi instructed. Huh? Okay, boss. Xiaoxuan, full of doubts, still did as told. Come, move the mouse a bit. Boss, the mouse isn't moving. Wait, I should have sent the rules email first. Lin Yi slapped his forehead. Then he quickly tapped on the keyboard on the desktop, sending an email to Nongfu Zhongxi M20. Immediately, a new message appeared in front of Xiaoxuan. You've been assigned a new job, camera controller. As a camera controller, you have the right to use the camera app, but you must use it with the boss's permission. Camera controller? Xiaoxuan was astonished, his mouth agape. Agree to it quickly. Okay, boss. The mouse is moving. Great. Now use the mouse to move the camera. It can move 3 meters from the shelter entrance in any direction, and it even has a wall-piercing perspective feature. Lin Yi patiently taught Xiaoxuan the operation method, then found a walkie-talkie in the shelter shop. Shelter walkie-talkie allows you to communicate with people in the shelter via wireless communication. Price, 20 coins. Lin Yi was short on cash, only having 29 coins in total, but he didn't hesitate and clicked purchase immediately. Anyway, from tomorrow, he'd be able to establish a coin trading channel, so he wouldn't worry about money then. He tossed one of the walkie-talkies to Xiaoxuan. From now on, you're our scout. Use the cameras to scout the surrounding situation and keep reporting to me, understood? Seeing Xiaoxuan still in a daze, Lin Yi chuckled. If I get ambushed even once, I'll drag you out and use you as a shield. Why yes, boss. Xiaoxuan, seeing his boss's intimidating smile, turned even paler, but quickly pulled himself together and nodded vigorously. Then, like a soldier, he forcefully hammered his chest. I'll complete the mission unless I die. Lin Yi reached out and ruffled Xiaoxuan's messy hair. This kid still had some spunk. At this moment, he noticed on the screen that the 4 professionals from the blue-haired gang had left. With a swift motion, swoosh, he returned to the real world again. Chapter 15, First kill all, then throw together. Lin Yi hid in the shadows of the supermarket. While silently pulling out a pistol, he whispered into the walkie-talkie, "Can you hear me?" "I can hear you, boss." No unusual activity detected nearby, Ziaxuan responded clearly from the shelter through the walkie-talkie. Lin Yi instructed Ziaxuan to report immediately if anything happened. Then, he cautiously pushed open a door leading to the inside of the supermarket, stepping carefully a short distance in. He made his steps as light as possible. Given that he was facing a whole group of 4 professionals, there was no room for error. Inside the door was a narrow corridor, lit only by flickering candles and dim battery-powered lamps. There were many doors along the corridor. Lin Yi kept close to the wall, slowly approaching enough to be detected by the surveillance camera's range. "Boss, there are 2 people in the room to your right. I feel like they might be on drugs, and they're not armed." Lin Yi decisively drew his sword and nudged the door open a crack to glimpse a security room. He tiptoed inside. The few monitors on the wall were broken, some clearly used as dartboards, riddled with holes. The 2 punks were like boneless jellyfish, collapsed onto office chairs. Their eyes were unfocused and drooling at the corners of their mouths, with eerie, silly grins on their faces. Without hesitation, Lin Yi swiftly thrust his sword into one of the drug addicts' throats. The punk's eyes widened as if trying to say something, but all that came was a gush of blood and a bubbling sound. Meanwhile, the other punk suddenly stirred, but he fell asleep again, snoring loudly. Lin Yi easily swung the sword again to let him sleep more soundly. "Boss, wait for me." "Ugh." With a glance at the walkie-talkie, Lin Yi returned promptly to the shelter without a word. No matter what the situation, ensuring his own safety was the wisest choice. Back at the shelter, he saw Ziaxuan with wide eyes, vomiting profusely by the table. Thank goodness Ziaxuan ran in time, otherwise, the laptop could have been ruined and rendered useless. "Get yourself together quickly, we can't afford any mistakes." Lin Yi's voice was cold, devoid of emotion. Startled by his boss's cold tone, Ziaxuan bit his lip and slapped himself twice hard. The slap seemed to miraculously suppress his nausea forcefully. "Boss. I'm fine now." Ziaxuan, his face imprinted with a clear 5-finger mark, lifted his head to report to Lin Yi. "Not bad," Lin Yi nodded, returning to the real world once again. Lin Yi combed through the security room carefully, luckily finding a pistol and about 30 rounds of 9mm ammunition. Then he left the room, continuing to hug the wall and stealthily sneak down the corridor. Just as he was about to open the next door, Ziaxuan's urgent voice broke through the walkie-talkie. "Boss, watch out, someone is coming out." Lin Yi swiftly teleported back to the shelter, and a second later, the door slowly opened, letting out 2 hulking brutes. "What now? Have some fun or go out hunting?" A bulky, blue-spiked punk inquired of his companion next to him. "Boss. Boss killed all the women over 25. How do you plan to have fun?" the other drunkenly responded. As the 2 brawny men walked away, Lin Yi re-entered the real world. Aided by the camera's see-through function, he knew the room was currently empty, so he quickly stepped in. Unexpectedly, it turned out to be a chemistry lab. Thick white smoke filled the air, with tiles resembling white bricks scattered across the floor. Lin Yi wasn't interested in these flour-like substances. However, the laboratory apparatus was different and might prove incredibly useful in the future. Opportunity knocks but once, it's now or never. Chemicals? Take them. Beakers? Take them. Chairs, tables, and shelves? All into the shelter. He didn't even spare the light bulbs from the ceiling. Sporting a satisfied grin, Lin Yi frantically scavenged the room, knowing nearly every item here could boost the shelter's experience points. A few minutes later, he had almost emptied the room entirely. "Boss, 2 people are coming toward the room. They're unarmed," Ziaxuan warned through the walkie-talkie. Lin Yi quickly hid behind the door. Meanwhile, the 2 punks stepped into the room, bewilderment written on their faces at the sight of the pitch-black space, completely unaware of what had happened. One of the punks took several steps inside, trying to switch on the wall lamp. However, he didn't know a man with a terrifying smile was creeping up behind him. A swift swing of a sword severed his head. Feeling something was amiss, the other punk quietly called out his companion's name. But after receiving no response for a long time, he realized something was seriously wrong. As he turned to escape, a powerful hand suddenly emerged from the darkness, clamping hard around his throat. He could only utter a gargle of terror before being dragged into the depths of the dark room. Searching the 2 punks, Lin Yi found no weapons but unexpectedly acquired a set of keys. Exiting the room, he continued to sneak through the corridor. In the darkness, he could hardly see anything. Subtle sounds seemed to drift to his ears, and he perked up, listening intently, feeling the sounds were coming from far away. However, as Lin Yi approached the next door, he suddenly identified it as the sound's source. "Boss, There are a lot of people in that room. I think they're asleep, Ziaxuan relayed. Asleep in broad daylight. Concealed in the shadows, Lin Yi pondered for a moment. He surmised this group might be night guards or hunters heading out to scavenge at night. The question was, how to take them out silently. Lin Yi crept closer to the door, gently prying it open and peering inside. The large room was arranged quite comfortably, with about 30 people sprawled on makeshift beds across the space. Weak flickers from a few candles provided scant illumination. Under such conditions, even the slightest noise would certainly wake everyone up. Yet, an ingenious plan had already formed in Lin Yi's mind. He silently slipped into the room, approaching a sleeping punk, placing his hand on him, and focusing his mind. With a swish, both were teleported back to a clearing in the shelter. Initially lying on a makeshift bed, the punk was now airborne, instantly losing balance and crashing to the ground. Damn! He squinted, cursing immediately, looking for the prankster. Instead, what met his eyes was a gleaming sword. In a panic, he clamped his hand over his throat, yet blood continued to gush. Dhuan. Lin Yi shouted to the young man nearby, come over and take care of him. But he's still alive. Dhuan stumbled over, looking nervous with his face pale as paper. Then sent him on his way. Lin Yi snapped his fingers, a one-handed sword appearing at Dhuan's feet. His gaze never left the youth. They might be carrying guns, so I won't repeat the importance of finishing them off. Also, remember to search the bodies thoroughly. After speaking, Lin Yi glanced at Dhuan, who was clutching the sword and trembling slightly, and then returned to the real world without another word. Seconds later, Lin Yi brought back another punk. Before the man could settle, Lin Yi's sword glided through the air, severing his head which rolled onto the grass. The previous punk was also headless, suggesting Dhuan acted efficiently. Where to put the bodies? Dhuan's voice trembled audibly. Lin Yi pointed to a deep, dark pit not far off. Finish them all, then dump them together. Chapter 16, He Kills Without Batting an Eye. The sword in Lin Yi's hand sliced through the air, and yet another thug fell to the ground with a thud. At this moment, the open space of the shelter was already piled high with a total of 25 bodies. Every time Lin Yi brought back new bodies from the real world, Dhuan frantically rushed to finish them off, so much so that there was no time to search the bodies. There was really no choice, the current manpower at the shelter was indeed critically lacking. Chen Yui was busy with internal affairs all day long, her younger sister was still just a little girl, Ziaxuan had to use cameras to scout the outside situation, old Mark struggled with walking, let alone helping out. Currently, the only one available was Dhuan. It seems that there is an urgent need to recruit more people and strengthen the power of the shelter. Lin Yi once again dragged back a thug who was still unconscious from the real world. This time he didn't draw his sword, instead, he swung his arm forcefully and tossed the guy towards the bottomless pit of the shelter like trash. Immediately afterward, an alert sounded in the space. Alert, this pit cannot accept any living beings with souls. The thug bounced back like a ball being smacked away, screaming loudly in the air. Impatiently, Lin Yi swung his sword directly, silencing the thug instantly. Then, he quickly returned to the real world, dispatching the remaining 3 thugs with a few quick moves. Returning to the shelter, he saw Dhuan searching through the spoils and walked forward, kicking the body of the thug who died first towards the bottomless pit. The pit has processed this body, and the shelter has gained 10 units of biological matter. Biomatter? What's that? Lin Yi muttered. No usage permission at his time, please work hard to increase the shelter's level. Lin Yi's face darkened, and he moved to the dozens of bodies, kicking each fragmented corpse into the bottomless pit like soccer balls one after another. After clearing the battlefield, he returned to the real world again. Dhuan looked around, ensured no one could hear him, and lowered his voice to say to Ziaxuan, brother. The boss is terrifying. He kills without blinking an eye. Ziaxuan stared intently at the screen, his tone firm, the stronger the boss, the safer we are. Besides, those guys are worse than zombies, they're not even human. Dhuan sighed deeply after hearing this. The brother was right. In this post-apocalyptic world, following a boss with a bleeding heart mindset or a ruthless one would both lead to a bad end. Since the 2 brothers followed Lin Yi, they found this boss, though strict in task assignments, very humane with his subordinates. Especially Lin Yi's formidable strength and ruthless methods. This kind of gentle approach with his own people and fierce toughness with enemies really provided a sense of safety and belonging for his subordinates in such a chaotic post-apocalyptic world. Just then, some supplies suddenly appeared on the open space of the shelter, including a simple bed and other furniture. Seeing this, Dhuan immediately sprinted over and worked harder than ever before. In reality, Lin Yi carefully searched this room and returned to the previous rooms, collecting the bodies of the dead thugs one by one. He had a strong premonition that these so-called biological matters would be of great use in the future. Suddenly, a voice came through the walkie-talkie from Ziaxuan. "Boss, there is a guard ahead." Upon hearing this, Lin Yi immediately returned to the shelter and stood in front of a laptop. On the screen, a man was holding a flashlight, with a gun sticking out of his pocket, and a large machete in his right hand, passing the spot where Lin Yi had disappeared. Lin Yi quickly raised his sword and transported himself to the real world. It all happened so suddenly that the man didn't even have time to react before his head was separated from his body. He died not knowing where the enemy had come from. "Boss. There's a room to your right where the kidnapped women are kept. There are also a few thugs inside bullying them." Lin Yi shut off the flashlight and quietly crept forward. At the intersection, he carefully peeked around a corner. He saw two thugs guarding a metal door in the dim corridor, their hands holding guns, looking like they wouldn't be easy to handle. It really was a bit tricky to take them down quietly. After thinking for a moment, Lin Yi turned and went back to the shelter. "Get Chen Yui for me," Lin Yi said to Ziaxuan, then sat in front of the laptop waiting. At this moment, he noticed Ziaxuan was covering his crotch, awkwardly walking towards Chen Yui's tent. Lin Yi didn't react at first, then glanced back at the screen and understood. Turns out the camera had captured all the footage of the thugs and those women, and after watching so long, it's understandable for the guy to feel awkward. Moreover, these girls might all be carefully chosen playthings by the blue-haired gang, each very beautiful, their long hunger making them appear particularly slender. "You called me, boss?" Chen Yui's crisp voice came from behind. "I have a task for you. It's a bit dangerous, just depends on if you dare to take it." Lin Yi explained the task in detail to her. Unexpectedly, Chen Yui agreed to the dangerous task without hesitation. Lin Yi handed her the flashlight, then transported her to the supermarket corridor. "Is anyone there? I heard you have food here." Chen Yui tried to make her voice sound gentle, though she was incredibly nervous inside. She pretended to be calm and slowly walked along the corridor. "Did you hear that?" The muscle man guarding the door softly asked his companion. "I'm not deaf. Shine the flashlight over there and see what's going on. Wow, this chick is so gorgeous, and so clean. I want to go first." "Why should you go first?" "I heard her voice first." The two muscle men whispered, with greedy light in their eyes, creeping toward Chen Yui. As soon as they reached the intersection, they lunged at her fiercely. "Ah!" Chen Yui screamed. She looked in horror as Lin Yi appeared behind the two drooling musclemen. In the blink of an eye, there was a flash of cold light, and their heads were chopped off into the air before rolling to their own feet. A few seconds later, Lin Yi returned to the shelter with Chen Yui. As soon as Chen Yui steadied herself, she ran to the side and started throwing up repeatedly. "Ziaxuan and Dchuan, come over here," Lin Yi shouted. He gathered Chen Yui and the two brothers together, equipped each with a silenced pistol, and then returned to the real world with his new team. As soon as they landed, Lin Yi kicked the door open with a bang, storming into the room with guns pointed at the bewildered thugs. Inside the room, two thugs were lying on the couch, clearly high on drugs, while the others were indulging with the girls at the moment. There were 9 girls who could move, all about 20 years old, and a girl lying in the corner whose condition was unknown. "What's going on? Who are you? Do you want to die?" A thug covered in tattoos, despite being naked, jumped up and shouted viciously. Bang! Lin Yi couldn't be bothered with nonsense, shooting directly at the head, instantly blasting the bragging mouth into pulp. In an instant, the thugs rushed over. All the girls started screaming too. Chapter 17, 10 New Female Residents. Lin Yi struck quickly and precisely. Like a cold-hearted assassin, his speed was jaw-droppingly fast. In no time, he had dealt with most of the enemies, leaving only 2 small thugs passed out on chairs. "Dchuan, tie up these 2 guys for me," Lin Yi ordered over his shoulder. Then, he stepped forward, approaching the curled-up girls. Looking at these girls, Lin Yi grimaced and murmured to himself, "Now, how am I supposed to deal with you?" These girls were exceptionally beautiful, but it was obvious they had been starved for a long time, their bodies weak. Moreover, they were unclothed, their bodies covered in bruises and wounds, which was quite heart-wrenching. Seeing Lin Yi approach, the girls were terrified, like little rabbits facing a big bad wolf, retreating into the corner, crying and begging loudly. Lin Yi was stunned, thinking, "Do I look scarier than those thugs?" He turned to Chen Yui, asking, "Do I look like a bad guy?" "No, boss. You look like a madman." Chen Yui answered seriously, speaking the truth. Just as Lin Yi was about to argue, he caught sight of a large mirror on the wall, and saw himself wearing bright yellow pants, a pink t-shirt, and leather gloves. His face with a mischievous grin, his clothes splattered with blood spots. Well, the words were swallowed back. All right, Lin Yi was quite helpless, But the priority was to calm these girls down to avoid attracting enemies. "Shut up, all of you," Lin Yi growled softly. Instantly, the room was so quiet that a pin dropping could be heard. After a while, only a few suppressed sobs could be heard. "Good." Lin Yi grinned. "I'm here looking for supplies. If you know the layout of this camp, I can take you to the Louvre and offer some food." "No. Please, I don't want to be used by men anymore." At this moment, a girl raised her hand, her voice trembling with tears, her body shivering with fear. She was clearly too weak to resist. The path before her was either finding a powerful person to rely on, or going to the Louvre to be toyed with by those in power. The key is that such perverts are everywhere in the Louvre. "Then what do you want?" Lin Yi asked her. "I'm willing to work, you can make me do anything except. I can give you everything, but I won't sell my body." The girl, with tear-stained cheeks but fierce eyes, replied. "I can hire you, but it's all physical work. I can ensure you have food and safety, but you'll be so tired every day that you can't stand. Are you still willing? Even if I die from exhaustion, as long as I don't starve to death or sell my body, I will work." The red-haired girl's eyes blazed with determination, her tone firm. "This girl has a fiery spirit, like an iron lady. You're a good one, wait here," Lin Yi said, and suddenly, he vanished. He returned to the shelter, drafted a new contract, grabbed a pile of clothes that Chen Yui had organized, and returned to the real world. The girls were shocked at Lin Yi's operation, their jaws almost hitting the floor. They couldn't understand how he disappeared and suddenly reappeared with clothes. "The clothes are free for you. Those who want to work, put them on and came to sign the contract with me." Lin Yi tossed the clothes to the red-haired girl to distribute. After speaking, he turned to look at Xiaoxuan, teasing with a smile, "Put away those lustful gazes, turn around and keep a watch outside." Xiaoxuan's face turned red, and he quickly turned, holding his gun and staring at the hallway. Soon, the girls began dressing, but the scene appeared comical. The clothes were grabbed at random, sizes and styles mismatched. Some girls wore short skirts with thick winter coats, others wore thin t-shirts with long cotton pants. Lin Yi saw even the girl who was barely making it in the corner being dressed by her companions. Therefore, he walked over to the unconscious girl's side, placed his hand on her forehead, and in the blink of an eye, transported her to the shelter. "She's gone," a girl exclaimed. "Where did she go?" the red-haired girl asked Lin Yi, bewildered. "To a place where she can work," Lin Yi replied seriously, never ambiguous about the residents of the shelter. "Boss, I also want to work for you," the red-haired girl pleaded earnestly, her voice filled with sincerity. "Me too. Me too. Please, I don't want to go through hunger and humiliation anymore." The girls surrounded Lin Yi, begging him to take them. Lin Yi nodded and with a wave of his hand, 9 contracts appeared in front of the girls. There were newly added clauses at the bottom of the contracts. "You have been invited to become a resident of the space-time shelter. Please familiarize yourself with the rules of this shelter. If you agree to these rules, please say I agree, and you will be taken to the shelter. But please note, the owner of the shelter is its space-time shelter's king and sovereign. As a shelter resident, you have the right to have a place to live, to receive food, to obtain protection. You are prohibited from touching the boss's belongings, engaging in conflicts with other survivors, damaging the shelter, terminating this contract. You need to obey all orders given by the boss. Other matters, this contract can be changed at any time. Without the boss's permission, you may not leave the shelter. If you agree to the terms of this contract, you will automatically be transported to the shelter. Appendix: no one, including the boss, may violate your will, forcing you into a relationship with any man, woman and unknown entity. This clause must not be altered or removed from this contract. Lin Yi specifically added this clause to the contract. This means the provision applies to all previous contracts. "I agree," the red-haired girl declared first, and with that, she disappeared, appearing in the shelter. "I agree too," said a blonde girl. Soon, the other girls, one after another, expressed their agreement. When everything was settled, the room was left with just a few tied-up thugs, Lin Yi, and his people. Lin Yi looked around and waved his hand, first letting others return to the shelter. He himself stayed behind to continue searching for supplies. Inside the shelter, the girls looked around in disbelief as they suddenly found themselves in a clearing in the forest. Here, tall and straight poplar trees lined up like loyal guards, sunlight streaming through the leaf gaps, adding a touch of dreamlike quality to the land. Not far away, 2 plots of cultivated land awaited, planted with newly sprouted potatoes, the tender green leaves wavering gently in the breeze, signifying an upcoming harvest. Beside the fields was a pond, the clear water flowing gently, wildflowers whose names were unknown blooming freely around it. They soon saw several simple yet cozy tents scattered across the forest clearing. In the center of the tent cluster was a big pot, smoke swirling above it, with the scent of meat and vegetables wafting around. Here, there seemed to be no fear, no hunger, none of the terrifying violence and humiliation. The girls took a deep breath. At this moment, they realized that stepping into the shelter might be stepping into a hopeful new life. Chapter 18, Burning the Blue-Haired Gang. Lin Yi infiltrated the Blue-Haired Gang and transmitted 10 girls to the shelter. But according to the plan, the task of scouring supplies was not yet complete. From the girls' stories, Lin Yi learned that aside from those he had already dealt with, there were still over 30 thugs in the Blue-Haired Gang. Coincidentally, most of these people had gone out hunting. More surprisingly, from the mouths of 2 captured thugs, he learned that the Blue-Haired Gang actually had a large warehouse of supplies. It was not far ahead. Lin Yi concealed himself and sneaked to the front of the warehouse door, where not a single person was guarding it, and the door wasn't even locked. He peered inside, wow! Instantly shocked by the sight before him. The warehouse was piled high with supplies, all sorts of items packed full, almost reaching the ceiling. Inside the warehouse, from food, daily household items, chemicals, to leisure drinks, everything was available. In the corner, there were even several containers filled with goods. 20 minutes later, Lin Yi lay in the center of the now empty warehouse, his clothes soaked with sweat, but his face beamed with an irrepressible smile. Originally, his shelter was just a clearing in the woods, but now it had transformed into a large outdoor warehouse. Chen Yuiu made a rough estimate and informed Lin Yi that these supplies were enough to sustain over 100 people in luxury for half a year. This haul was truly a massive profit. At this time, a tense voice from Ziaxuan suddenly came through the walkie-talkie. "Boss, someone is coming through the corridor." Lin Yi immediately stood up, pulled out a pistol with a silencer, and cautiously observed through the door crevice. He saw a member of the Blue-Haired Gang, holding a flashlight, complaining non-stop, "Boss just has to eat tuna pasta. How am I supposed to find it in this messy pile of boxes?" Seeing he was alone, Lin Yi didn't plan to waste bullets. He suddenly leapt from the corner, delivering a powerful punch accurately to the thug's chin, knocking him unconscious. Lin Yi transmitted him to the shelter, hoping to extract some valuable information from him. Sure enough, shortly after, Ziaxuan's voice came through the walkie-talkie again. "Boss, a right turn ahead is the garage, where a guard is detaining mechanician Louis." Without hesitation, Lin Yi cocked the gun, the bullet chambered instantly. As he walked out of the corner, he decisively opened fire. His agility value far surpassed that of ordinary people, leaving the opponent no time to react before being shot in the head, killed instantly. "Who are you? Are you here to rescue me?" An old man in oil-stained overalls trembled as he spoke. The old man had a blood-stained bandage haphazardly wrapped around his head, with bruises under his eyes, clearly having suffered a lot of beatings while in captivity. "I am here to help the poor at the expense of the rich. Time is of the essence. Quickly tell me where the most valuable things here are hidden?" Lin Yi's expression was stern. "So you don't plan to rescue me?" The old man looked at Lin Yi pitifully, eyes filled with pleading. Lin Yi remained expressionless, not even blinking, and turned straight away to survey the garage. The garage housed 20 motorcycles of various models, a small truck, with numerous car parts scattered around. Unfortunately, since the shelter's current level wasn't enough, large items like the truck couldn't be transmitted yet. Without the slightest hesitation, Lin Yi started dismantling. Anything that could be taken apart as parts, he quickly transmitted back to the shelter. For those that couldn't be dismantled, he doused them in gasoline, preparing for later processing. When Lin Yi completed his task and walked out of the garage, he found mechanician Louis following tightly behind. Without another word, he tied him up. "I'll give you a chance, think about what value you have for me." But, just as the old man began to speak, Lin Yi tapped his forehead, instantly transmitting him to the shelter. 10 minutes later, Lin Yi arrived at a staircase and stopped. He was on the first floor, but faintly sensed the danger above. Was it because he was near a professional? Lin Yi pondered to himself that one shouldn't be too greedy and must know when to stop. However, after hesitating briefly, he resolutely stepped onto the stairs. "Boss, an armed guy is coming downstairs, expected to enter your line of sight in 5 seconds." Ziaxuan's reports on reconnaissance were becoming more precise. "Received." He briefly responded, then placed a can of meat at his feet. Then, he quickly slipped into the shadows. Soon, a set of clear footsteps approached, another little thug from the Blue-Haired Gang. He spotted the can of meat on the ground, let out a huh, and was about to bend down to pick it up. But at the moment he reached out, he was horrified to find himself covered by a giant shadow. Instinctively, he looked up, only to see Lin Yi's sandbag-sized fist. Bang! With one punch, the thug was knocked unconscious, and Lin Yi casually threw him into the shelter, continuing to move upward. When he was about to reach the second floor, Lin Yi's pace gradually slowed. He looked up and surveyed the second floor's layout at a glance. There was a self-service restaurant, a lounge, an office, an armory, and an aquarium. This time, without Ziyuan's reminder, Lin Yi at once saw two guys carrying machine guns patrolling back and forth ahead. This was tricky. Lin Yi transmitted back to the shelter, sat in front of the laptop, and carefully checked the situation using the camera. He found these two gunmen wearing heavy bulletproof vests, with peculiar emblems on their helmets, clearly not comparable to ordinary thugs. After a moment of contemplation, Lin Yi picked up a gasoline can and quickly returned to the real world. Taking advantage of the gunmen's patrol intervals, he poured gasoline over the entire first floor and parts of the second floor. He even placed several gasoline cans in key positions like the stairwell, corridor, and exhibition hall. After arranging everything, Lin Yi went outside the store, gently flicked a jumping flame onto the fuse. At this moment, inside the store's luxurious private room, a big fat man with thick blue hair was cursing at his subordinates. "Where's my tuna pasta, huh?" The room was brightly lit, the huge and luxurious chandelier casting dazzling light. A group of little blue-haired subordinates trembled all over, none daring to look up, and no one dared to respond. The blue-haired fat man suddenly drew a one-handed sword from his waist, his eyes fierce and brutal, sweeping through the trembling subordinates. Suddenly, without warning, he raised and lowered his sword. "Ah! Ah!" Shrill screams of agony rang out, as several subordinates clutched their groins, writhing and wailing in pain on the ground. The remaining subordinates were so frightened they kneeled down with a thud, pleading in terror. However, just as the blue-haired fat man was about to swing his sword again, tongues of flame suddenly leapt out of the floor crevices. In an instant, the entire space was engulfed in flames, the fire rapidly spreading, accompanied by crackling sounds. "Burn, burn with abandon." Lin Yi stood in the distance, watching as the large grocery store was engulfed by the roaring flames, smiling like a child. This time, not only did he acquire a large amount of supplies, he also toyed with the blue-haired gang, gaining a lot of experience points for the shelter. Most importantly, he escaped unscathed. Bang! An abrupt gunshot, followed by a stream of French curses. Lin Yi dodged to the side, keeping a close watch on the front. He saw a fat man, his whole body on fire, fleeing from the burning store. He cursed and screamed in pain, firing wildly until the magazine ran empty. With his last ounce of strength, he reached out to Lin Yi. "Please. I don't want to die." However, before he could finish speaking, he fell straight to the ground, motionless. Lin Yi watched it all with indifference, then glanced in the direction of the apartment behind him, still opting not to transmit to the shelter, but turned and swiftly left. After he left, in the apartment not far away, a man tremblingly picked up the walkie-talkie and shouted loudly, "Headquarters." That gay single-handedly wiped out the blue-haired gang's base. Chapter 19, Shelter Expansion Headquarters? Headquarters. The man's eyes were fixed on the supermarket still burning fiercely. He picked up the walkie-talkie, his voice trembling with anxiety. "Headquarters, do you copy? Damn it. This is headquarters, report the situation." A lazy voice came through the walkie-talkie. "The blue-haired gang's base has been completely destroyed, burned to the ground. It's unclear if there are any survivors. The blue-haired gang leader is dead too, nothing left of him but ash." The man's emotions were at their peak, his voice almost distorting. "It was that gay guy. He's the one who did it." "What the hell are you raving about?" came a shocked response from the other end of the walkie-talkie. "The gay guy went into the building. About an hour later, he came out with a gas can and lit the fuse. Then the blue-haired gang leader rushed out, swallowed by the raging fire immediately." It was terrifying. The man seemed to have plunged into extreme fear, completely ignoring the chorus of calls and questions from headquarters on the walkie-talkie. He muttered to himself, "I feel like he noticed me. I really don't have the guts to follow him anymore. What about the supplies? What happened to the supplies? Don't you know there's a lot of vital provisions stored there?" The voice on the other end immediately raised in pitch, almost to the point of tears, filled with panic. "I really don't know. The whole building is engulfed in flames, there's no way to get close to check." The man replied helplessly and fearfully. "You useless fool. Go find out immediately." A voice roared hoarsely from the walkie-talkie, the person on the other end obviously hopping mad. That day was extremely tense and difficult. The Ziyuan brothers dragged all the corpses of the punks toward the invincible pit. After handling all the corpses, they were so exhausted they nearly collapsed. The new girls found suitable clothes and took a refreshing bath in the pond. With Chen Yui's help, they even set up tents, settling down temporarily. However, at this moment, the shelter was still a mess, as chaotic as a garbage dump. The old mechanician was still tightly bound but at least had a decent meal, and no one beat him. A large amount of supplies was piled up haphazardly, almost occupying all the open space, looking like a small mountain ready to collapse at any moment. Apparently, These harvested supplies can only be thoroughly accounted for after sorting. And the shelter's experience points, upgrades, and rewards should have all increased by now. However, Lin Yi was utterly exhausted. He decided to check it out tomorrow, so he had dinner, handed over the big picture to Chen Yuiu, and then dove into the tent and fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, everything was as usual. Lin Yi was woken up by Chen Yuiu's attempts to let him rest fully and relax. An hour later, everyone gathered together for breakfast. Lin Yi specifically set up several large tables and chairs so that everyone could sit together for a meal and get to know one another. Chen Yuiu's younger sister, once just skin and bones, now had slightly rounded cheeks, looking a bit chubbier, like a cute porcelain doll. After a bath and a worry-free night's sleep, the girl's spirits were completely different, looking much prettier. "Boss." Chen Yuiu's voice was gentle. "What's up?" Lin Yi put down his fork. "It's really crowded here now." Lin Yi nodded, indicating that he would take care of it. After the meal, he went to the laptop, scratched his head, and started moving the mouse. "Where is it? Where the heck is it? Wasn't there an option to expand the shelter's space? How much does it cost?" Lin Yi muttered to himself as he quickly operated the mouse on the computer. "Boss?" The blonde girl watched Lin Yi from afar, thinking of going over to see if she could help. "It's fine, he's working on getting us some benefits." Chen Yuiu muttered with her mouth full of food. She had conversed deeply with Lin Yi for a long time, and with her own cleverness, she often guessed Lin Yi's actions and thoughts. "Benefits? Yeah, you see how pained he looks, he's definitely planning to improve our quality of life." "The boss is Asian?" "Yes. His name is Lin Yi. Being in a foreign country at a time like this can't be easy for him." A very tall black-haired girl said heartily. "The boss is a real strong man, he won't be easily defeated by challenges. He's like a bulldozer plowing forward, able to break through any obstacle." Although Chen Yuiu hadn't known Lin Yi for long, she admired him deeply. Chen Yuiu stood up from the table. "Our first task is to organize the essentials, the boss will find a way to give us more space." She gathered the girls together and took them to go to work. Lin Yi sat in front of his laptop and opened his emails. Subject: Accepting survivors. 3 survivors have agreed to your terms and entered the shelter. Your shelter has gained 30 experience points. Subject: Receiving items. The shelter has received a washing machine, an electric razor, a smartphone. These items earned your shelter 35 experience points. Subject: Receiving items. The shelter has received 20 motorcycles of different models. The shelter has received car parts including. These items earned your shelter 110 experience points. Subject: Receiving the items. These items earned your shelter 55 experience points. Subject: Accepting survivors. 9 survivors have agreed to your terms and entered the shelter. Your shelter has gained 90 experience points. Subject: Upgrade. Congratulations, your shelter has reached level 6. As a reward, you receive a discount coupon for any item in the store. What a score. After receiving the coupon, Lin Yi finally found the option to expand the shelter space in the store, showing, current shelter space, 8,000 square meters, additional purchase price, 8,000 square meters at 100 coins. Lin Yi slammed the table. So expensive? Even with the coupon, it still required 50 coins to make the purchase. Hint: biomass can be exchanged for coins. Lin Yi was taken aback, and upon clicking the information, he found that 5 units of biomass were worth only 1 coin. He couldn't help but exclaim that the shelter's exchange rules were such a rip-off. Currently, he had 380 biomass and 9 coins, and after some consideration, he finally clicked to confirm the purchase. Thank you for your purchase and using the coupon. Expansion is underway. Please try to remain calm. An earthquake has happened. The announcement had barely ended when Lin Yi heard the girls screaming in terror. Immediately, the fog wall began moving further away, revealing new trees, shrubs, and grasslands in view. The earthquake lasted only a moment, but the usable space within the shelter had genuinely expanded. After the expansion was completed, Lin Yi began inspecting, patrolling his domain. Currently, the shelter size had doubled, with the expansion starting from the center and then extending outward in all directions. At this point, the girls had already begun organizing and sorting the spoils he had gathered. The only downside was that in the shelter, everything had to be moved around using brute force. Lin Yi looked at those huge crates and appliances, mulling over how great it would be if everyone had a cart, making it much easier. Suddenly, he turned his gaze to Louis, the mechanician tied up not far away. Chapter 20, the first coin transaction. When Lin Yi walked up to the mechanician Louis, the old man was enjoying the sunshine, looking quite content. It seems you're quite enjoying life here, Lin Yi smiled and said. Louis did not get up, of course, being able to eat a decent meal and not getting beaten, what more could an old bag of bones like me ask for? The sunlight was warm and the air was particularly fresh. Louis lay on the grass, momentarily feeling as if he had grown younger. Then, he struggled to stand up, even though his hands were still tied behind his back. He sincerely expressed his position to Lin Yi. I can fix cars and modify some machinery. I also know a bit about basic electronic equipment. At the moment, nothing needs fixing. I heard this place used to be just an empty plot with nothing. But because of you, it didn't take long for supplies to overflow. In a month or two, this place will definitely need mechanics, right? Hope filled Louis's eyes as he continued, and besides, which reputable boss doesn't have a modified, comfortable ride? You've got a point, old man. You're hired. Lin Yi waved his hand, and a contract appeared in front of the old man. Louis looked at it carefully several times and then grinned as he agreed. Only a fool would refuse such good conditions. He said with a smile, extending a hand to Lin Yi. Lin Yi swiftly and deftly sliced the rope with a knife, and it fell to the ground. Then, he told Louis to find Chen Yu, who would arrange for him to work on making push carts. 3 hours later. After checking the surveillance footage, Lin Yi discovered that ever since defeating the blue-haired gang yesterday, some suspicious individuals had indeed been looking for him. Fortunately, the apartment building was still safe. Lin Yi flickered back to the real world. Today, he was to make his first coin transaction with a merchant inside the Louvre, and it could not go wrong. After taking out a few stray zombies, Lin Yi arrived at an apartment near the Louvre. He first teleported a backpack full of potatoes, then teleported Dhu on out as well. Lin Yi instructed Dhu on to carry the potatoes and follow him. As soon as they reached the front of the Louvre, a foreign police officer shouted loudly, "Stop! Who are you people?" Lin Yi looked up and noticed that the number of guards at the checkpoint had increased several times. "Officer, our boss shaved his beard and changed his clothes. You probably didn't recognize him. He used to wear bright yellow pants and a pink t-shirt." Dhu on stepped up to explain to the foreign police officer. "It's you." The foreign police officer was initially shocked and couldn't help but size Lin Yi up. Now Lin Yi, dressed in black jeans and a green t-shirt, no longer looked like the hip-hop singer he did before. He looked like a tall, well-built, and upright tough guy. Can't deny it, damn, he's pretty handsome. The foreign police officer spat in his heart. What's going on recently? Why have there been so many additional guards? Lin Yi asked as he casually tossed a can of meat to the officer. The foreign officer gleefully caught it, glanced around cautiously, and after ensuring no one was paying attention, lowered his voice to explain. Apparently, there was a fierce individual around the Louvre lately, rumored to be gay, who single-handedly wiped out a blue-haired gang's headquarters. This person supposedly killed without hesitation, using extremely brutal methods. In that large base, no one survived. And not only did this person kill, but he also enjoyed orchestrating explosions, blowing up an entire supermarket. Now, many people from both the black and white sides were looking for him, all wanting to seize the blue-haired gang's original supplies. This increase in guards was partly due to the growing population at the camp needing stricter inspections. Another reason was to catch this gay person. Gay? Why do you say that? Lin Yi asked sternly, expressionless. Wearing such flamboyant clothes, if that's not gay, then what is? All right, go on in, the foreign officer said. Reaching the refugee camp square at the Louvre, Lin Yi immediately noticed the population here had skyrocketed by 50%, and the number of starving people had increased several times. A tall, starved man yelled, offering himself in exchange for food. Lin Yi disgustedly kicked him away, quickened his stride, and with Dhu on, rushed into the Louvre. They soon found the merchant. So handsome. Did you bring the food? The merchant was equally shocked by Lin Yi's new outfit. Lin Yi signaled Dhu on with a glance. Dhu on immediately unloaded the backpack filled with 90 pounds of potatoes and placed it in front of the merchant. The merchant, cautious as ever, even though he had engaged in multiple stable transactions with Lin Yi, still weighed the food. Great. Exactly 90 pounds. Here are the 200 coins you wanted. The merchant handed over a bag. Dhu on accepted it, carefully counted the coins, and then nodded to Lin Yi to confirm the quantity was correct. Do you have more potatoes? The merchant probed. Perhaps. Why? Many people want to exchange coins for food, almost brandishing knives at me, the merchant said with a bitter smile. There are more, but here I can only give you 90 pounds at a time. You understand? We could trade in a neutral zone. All right, next time I'll bring you 180 pounds. Lin Yi said, glancing behind him. After greeting the merchant, he walked straight towards several soldiers. These soldiers looked stern, clad in bulletproof vests, helmets on their heads, and tightly gripping assault rifles. As soon as they saw Lin Yi approaching, they became extremely alert, as if facing a formidable enemy. Why are you tracking me? Lin Yi stared closely at the leading officer. When he was trading with the merchant, Lin Yi had already sensed someone was secretly following him. But the other party hid very well, and it wasn't until the deal was done that he confirmed the followers were these soldiers. At first, he didn't know what was happening, but after thinking it over, he figured it out. At that time, the foreign police officer at the Louvre checkpoint was probably playing dumb. He must have recognized him but intentionally did not raise the alarm. Only after he entered the Louvre did the officer report it. A classic trap. That guy even took one of his cans of meat. We hope you can come with us to see the commander. The leading officer, a bit disgruntled because Lin Yi discovered the tracking, managed to convey his request with a restrained tone. Lin Yi did not object. At this point, he considered himself a small boss. Transaction partners couldn't be limited to just the first floor of the Louvre. He decided to go to the second floor, to see what the so-called commander was like. Following the officer, Lin Yi left the civilian area, and upon reaching the second floor, found the guards here were several times that of below. Windows and doors reinforced with sturdy steel bars, cameras and sensors installed all around. The second floor was fortified like a small fortress. They stopped in front of a meticulously arranged office, and the soldier gestured towards the door invitingly. Without hesitation, Lin Yi pushed the door open and walked in. Inside was a short, fat man sitting at a large table, staring intently at several monitors displaying scenes of the civilian area. The short, fat man, draped in gold and silver, wore an expression of arrogance, as if he fancied himself the king of the Louvre. Chapter 21, The Bluffing Game. Sit down. The arrogant short and fat man casually pointed at a wooden chair in front of the table. But he himself sat steadily in the large leather chair, trying to create an aura of superiority. Lin Yi raised an eyebrow at this, and walked straight to another table, lazily leaning on the comfortable sofa. As a result, if the other party wanted to talk to him, they would have to stretch their necks to see his face clearly. Needless to say, Lin Yi's obvious disrespect made the short and fat man, who had long been in a position of power and luxury, extremely displeased. But he seemed very adept at concealing his emotions, still wearing a look of everything being under control on his face. You might be wondering why I invited you here today. Actually, I'm not wondering, isn't it obvious? Lin Yi yawned, his tone indifferent. Hee hee. Then let's get straight to the point. We've long planned to get rid of the blue-haired gang. But after wasting so much time preparing and using up so many resources, I appeared? Exactly. The short and fat man intertwined his fingers and leaned slightly forward, trying to exert pressure on Lin Yi opposite him. Lin Yi's lips curled up. Then you really should thank me. After all, you didn't expend a single soldier, nor even wasted a bullet. Hee hee hee. While that's true, we've put a lot of plans and resources into it without gaining anything. The short and fat man tapped his fingers on the table. So, you want me to hand over all the things the blue-haired gang stole? Lin Yi asked in a faint surprise, but his exaggerated expression was so obvious that anyone could see he was deliberately acting. The short and fat man felt greatly offended, slamming the table hard with a bang, and shouted angrily, "Look at how many people we have here, feeding such a large group is no joke. I thought people were starving to death in this camp every day. It seems they're eating too much and dying from bloating." Lin Yi made no effort to hide his sarcasm. The veins on the short and fat man's neck bulged instantly, clearly infuriated, but he was still trying hard to control himself, attempting to stay calm. Lin Yi saw this and continued, "By the way, I heard you sold those girls to the blue-haired gang." "Nonsense. That's pure slander." The short and fat man's nerves were completely rattled, his face flushed with anger. Lin Yi didn't speak further, just squinted his eyes and stared closely at the short and fat man. His gaze was so sharp that it seemed to pierce through to the heart, making the other feel unnerved. According to the confirmation from two blue-haired gang captives and several girls, the upper levels of the Louvre indeed had shady dealings with the blue-haired gang. It's just that he wasn't sure yet whether the short and fat man in front of him was the mastermind, or just a small fry. After a while, the short and fat man, his face still flushed, gradually calmed down and said in a deep voice, "I want the blue-haired gang supplies. And burn it with the supermarket." Lin Yi shrugged, his tone indifferent, as if those supplies were of no importance. "Then why did you attack them? Out of a sense of justice?" The short and fat man's voice suddenly raised, and he slammed the table hard again, roaring, "Then you must compensate us for our losses." Lin Yi looked at him as if he was an idiot. Is this really an officer? How could his head be so muddled? "I know you have lots of food." The short and fat man shouted loudly. Lin Yi scratched his ear. "Oh, really? Where are they? Can you help me find them?" Bang. 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 The short and fat man punched the desk, then several more punches, his eyes bloodshot, the murderous intent in his gaze. He roared, "Do you think you're so great? Do you think you don't need to fear me? Why should I fear you? Lin Yi calmly stood up, walked to the short and fat man, and looked down at him with contempt in his eyes. I took down an entire gang of lunatics by myself. If I want to leave, no one in this camp can stop me. Besides, you don't dare to do anything to me. Who knows how many armed personnel I have behind me on standby? The short and fat man's eyes suddenly became clear. As if awakened by Lin Yi's words, he asked, "Are you threatening me? I'm just reminding you that doing business with me is far wiser than opposing me. You think I really can't wipe out you guys? Maybe you can." Lin Yi suddenly grinned, a smile like a demon, chilling to the bone. He looked directly into the short and fat man's eyes. Firstly, you're too weak. Secondly, you can't find our base. Finally, you don't have enough power. Lin Yi, with a malicious smile, listed the reasons he had prepared for the man one by one. In an instant, the short and fat man's face turned pale. He gritted his teeth, staring intently at the always poised Lin Yi, as if trying to gauge the strength of Lin Yi's organization. However, after much contemplation, he was horrified to realize that the other party seemed to know everything about his situation, while he knew nothing about them. After weighing things up, he decided to probe a bit. You said doing business? But so far, the food you've brought is just a drop in the bucket compared to our needs. If I were to conveniently bring a ton of food here, do you think I could sell it smoothly and leave here without trouble? The short and fat man, extremely perceptive, captured these two keywords and immediately fell into contemplation, frowning tightly. Lin Yi, seeing the other party's serious expression, laughed. I will gradually scale up the trade, provided you have your men stop causing trouble. Transporting supplies is time-consuming and costly, and I'm always cautious in my dealings. After saying this, Lin Yi didn't bother speaking further, turned around, and prepared to leave. Hey, friend. The short and fat man suddenly shouted, hesitated for a moment, and finally said, so, shall we try to cooperate? Do you have the authority? Lin Yi stopped in his tracks and turned his head to ask. I can arrange for my men to facilitate within the specified range, but I want to see progress in cooperation soon. Lin Yi sneered internally, monitoring is monitoring, yet he speaks so righteously, what a hypocritical politician. However, he still responded, no problem. Then turned his head and walked out the door with Da Chuan. Next, Lin Yi looked at the white officer who had brought him upstairs, and ordered, take me out. The officer's face instantly turned gloomy, but he had obviously heard the conversation in the office, fully aware that this person was not to be provoked, and could only lead the way respectfully in front. Thus, accompanied by the officer, Lin Yi walked from the second floor to outside the Louvre camp. As soon as they walked out of the camp, Da Chuan finally couldn't contain his excitement and asked, Boss, what is the organization behind us? How many people are there? How many weapons? Lin Yi smiled and didn't answer him. Mainly because, he didn't know either. Almost everything he said earlier was bluffing. But clearly, that short and fat man had already taken the bait. Now he can conduct business more openly in the Louvre without taking unnecessary risks. Half an hour later, Lin Yi returned to the shelter. With the coin, the first thing he did was purchase and set up 2 small plots of land. Currently, he owns 4 plots of land in total, all planted with potatoes. After all, compared to special cabbages, potatoes are not only easier to grow but also have a more considerable yield. Chapter 22, Warm Gathering. Lin Yi sat in front of his laptop, fully focused on researching the future development direction of the shelter. At this moment, a dozen girls were working hard in 2 newly opened fields. They methodically turned the soil, sowed seeds, their foreheads covered in sweat, yet no one stopped their work. By the pond, the boys, led by the old mechanician Louis, energetically built a shelter. Thick wooden stakes were firmly hammered into the ground. Then, everyone worked together to hang the curtains in place. A simple yet practical shower was thus born. From now on, whenever someone wants to shower, they just need to pull the curtain to feel secure and not worry about being peeped at. In the evening, the girl who nearly died of hunger woke up. After eating some mashed potatoes, her complexion greatly improved. After dark, everyone, as usual, sat around the blazing fire preparing to have dinner. The dancing flames reddened everyone's face. See, you have already adapted well to this place. From now on, this is your home. Lin Yi stood up and slowly gazed at everyone present. His voice was steady and powerful. As long as you work hard, you will always have a place to call home, food to satisfy your hunger, and protection. Perhaps some of you don't know me yet, I am Lin Yi, and you can call me the boss. As he spoke, memories surged like a tide into Lin Yi's heart. Once, he was wandering the streets, penniless, without even a passport from his own country. To survive, he had to beg, and when he was truly cornered, he had to steal. The streets were extremely cruel, He was close to death multiple times, either from hunger, disease, or getting beaten. He grew up in the most dangerous district on the outskirts. Or more precisely, he survived there. At 14, he joined a gang. His mathematical talent quickly revealed itself in front of the other members. Before long, the boss let him manage the gang's finances, even trained him, sent him to school, where he finally graduated with excellent grades. Afterward, Lin Yi went to university, majoring in accounting, and after learning he returned to manage various underground money-related projects for the gang. In fact, ever since Lin Yi joined the gang, the boss quite liked him, and after he showed his true potential, he basically became the boss's foster son. When the boss died, Lin Yi smoothly took over, commanding over 1,000 people under him. Everyone both feared and respected him. Until the appearance of that rebirth plan and then the street conflict. "Boss?" Chen Yui softly called, pulling Lin Yi out of the whirlpool of memories. "Sorry, I was just reminiscing the past." "Well, why don't the rest of you introduce yourselves?" "Chen Yui, you start." Lin Yi smiled as he sat down in the main seat. Chen Yui stood up. Everyone's eyes focused on her. Actually, she wasn't the prettiest girl here, but her figure was as slim as a 16-year-old girl. Her dark hair was a bit messy, casually draped over her shoulders, looking quite cute. What was most captivating about her was her sincere and charming smile. "I'm Chen Yui, and this is my sister Chen Lingling. I'm 28 years old and was the first to arrive here. I previously lived in the Louvre and couldn't get any food." As Chen Yui spoke, she became somewhat emotional, her eyes reddened. "Thanks to the boss for bringing me here, I still can't believe how lucky I am." After she finished, a bright smile appeared on Chen Yui's face, and she sat down. "I'm Dchuan, and this is my brother Ziyuan. We're 20 years old. We were being bullied by foreign police when the boss helped us. My brother and I both knew what we'd face once arrested." Dchuan recalled the scene back then, his heart still palpitating with fear. At this moment, Ziyuan also stood up. "That day, the boss not only saved me and my brother but also rescued Professor Curie and brought us here. We're just so grateful." Dchuan and Ziyuan looked almost identical, about average height, roughly around 1.7 meters, both very slender, their hair as messy as a bird's nest. If it weren't for the apocalypse, they probably would still be enjoying their youth in school, playing with their classmates. But now, surviving in this harsh end world is nothing short of a miracle. Next, the biologist and medical expert told Mark, and mechanician Louis, each stood up to introduce themselves. Then it was the red-haired woman's turn. She was previously in the blue-haired gang and was the first to request working for Lin Yi. "My name is Sylvie, I'm 21 years old. Before the apocalypse, I was a fashion magazine model." The red-haired girl reminisced about the past, paused for a moment, and showed a hint of sadness. She sighed and continued, "After Doomsday began, I joined a survivor group and hid in a basement for a long time. Later, we ran out of supplies and had to go out and find food." Saying this, she couldn't help but cry. "All my companions were bitten to death by zombies. I wanted to go to the Louvre, but they sold me to the blue-haired gang and locked me up. You know where?" Sylvie was an enthusiastic girl with a slender hourglass figure, big green eyes showing determination and caution after enduring hardships. She wiped her tears and earnestly looked at Lin Yi. "Boss, you know. When you appeared and wiped out those blue-haired gang bastards, I decided to follow you. You added clauses for protecting women's privacy in the contract. In my heart, you're a god. You're our god too." Instantly, all the girls stood up, their eyes reddened, filled with gratitude, deeply bowed to Lin Yi. Lin Yi looked at the scene before him, his throat choked by something, unable to speak for a moment. He silently thought to himself, when did this shelter have sandstorms, blowing sand into his eyes? Lin Yi quietly shook his head, calming his emotions, and softly urged everyone to sit down. At this time, the girl who used to be in the corner, not knowing if she was alive or dead, also weakly spoke up. "I'm Katsia. I'm 21 this year." She was as thin as a reed, with a sickly complexion, yet her eyes were intriguing. Her hair was a rare milky white, naturally so, but no one knew if it was due to illness or genetics. "I have some health issues, so I have to rely on others' help to survive, and sometimes I bring everyone a lot of trouble." "It's not like that, Katsia." Sylvie interrupted her excitedly, embracing her with pity and looking at Lin Yi, as if pleading. "Please. I've already heard too many pitying words in my short life, and hearing these complaints again only makes me sick." Katsia cried. "Enough arguing." Lin Yi really couldn't stand such sappy talk. He waved his hand, and a contract appeared in front of Katsia. Lin Yi stared at the girl, seriously saying, "In my eyes, you're no different from everyone else. You must work, labor to earn food, understand?" Katsia's eyes lit up, nodding vigorously. She carefully read the contract and immediately signed her name. Chapter 23, Future Planning. Currently, as the foundation of apocalyptic survival, the shelter's expansion must be prioritized. To cultivate more land and construct more buildings, a large number of survivor coins are indispensable. In the past, the only way to obtain these coins was by eliminating zombies. According to Lin Yi's statistics, on average, eliminating 10 zombies yields about 8 survivor coins. When Lin Yi informed the girls that coins must be obtained through zombie hunting, their faces were filled with anxiety. After all, most of them are frail and can manage daily chores, but when facing zombies, there's a high chance they'd become sacrifices. However, following the signed contract, they have no choice but to follow Lin Yi's arrangements. Amidst everyone's worries, Lin Yi's next words brought relief to all the girls. Lin Yi said calmly, "This method of obtaining coins, while hazardous, is also time-consuming. So, I've made a trade deal." He then informed everyone that by selling potatoes to a merchant at the Louvre, 1 pound could be exchanged for 2 coins, and 90 pounds could get 200 coins. Currently, a special plot of land can produce 900 pounds of potatoes, worth 2,000 coins, and if the price is raised, it could go up to 2,250 coins without issue. This is far more profitable than selling potatoes directly to the shelter at a rate of 1 coin per 2 pounds. As of now, each special plot costs 100 coins in the building shop. This way, through such profit margin, the profits would be considerable and could snowball. However, the only issue now is not knowing how many coins the survivors actually have. To be safe, besides gradually expanding trade with the Louvre, Lin Yi is also looking to find other survivor camps to expand trading channels. Think about it later, and see if anyone knows about these camps or knows someone. After Lin Yi finished speaking and looked around, he noticed everyone remained silent, most had a dejected look on their faces. A few even slapped their heads in frustration, feeling useless. Seeing everyone's low morale, Lin Yi thought for a moment and suddenly dropped a bombshell. "If you all agree, I can help you become professionals." As soon as he said this, the girls exploded with chatter and confusion filled the place. "Wow, calm down. Don't all of you shout at once, alright? I haven't finished speaking yet." Lin Yi quickly stood up to maintain order, and once everyone calmed down, he then laid out his plan and shared the information he had. Although it says professional, the system doesn't provide a complete set of a professional system. It might be a unique skill, a special item, or something else, but there will definitely be gains. The effect of these gains varies. For instance, Lin Yi's own shelter skills have limitless potential if developed well. Additionally, becoming a professional allows you to gain attribute points. You can enhance speed, power, and endurance. Thus, even if the skill is not very useful, the enhanced attributes can enable the girls to easily move heavy objects, plow the land in a short time, and such. Finally, Lin Yi looked seriously at the employees and said earnestly, "I assure everyone, I will never force anyone to fight or hunt." Suddenly, the scene became chaotic again. The girls screamed in excitement, and the boys cheered and raised their hands in excitement. Once everyone quieted down again, Lin Yi stated the next action objectives. First, we need to sort and categorize the miscellaneous items taken from the blue-haired gang. Useful materials will improve shelter's living quality, and the useless ones will be traded in the real world. Secondly, strive to earn coins to build necessary buildings like a medical clinic, warehouse, residential building, public bathhouse, etc. Through the store. "Boss, what will happen to us if you get killed?" the petite blonde girl Natasha asked, raising her hand. "I don't know." Lin Yi shrugged. "What punishment will violators of the contract face?" The red-haired girl Sylvie followed up with a question. "It depends on the severity of the violation. Minor ones are thrown to zombies, major ones are executed on the spot. Anyway, I won't leave any survivors." "Why are you all looking at me like that?" Lin Yi said as he glanced at everyone, noticing the terrified expressions on their faces as if seeing him for the first time. He did not explain further, just pointing to a deep, dark bottomless pit not far away. Instantly, everyone remembered Lin Yi's decisively ruthless demeanor when hunting down enemies. They couldn't help but feel a chill down their spines, a sense of horror. Rules must be strictly followed. Without order and discipline, we'd only fall into decay and chaos, and the shelter cannot develop. Anyone who betrays the shelter and survives would be a major threat to all residents. They may hold grudges, collude with other camps or organizations, and use their knowledge of the shelter to lay traps strategically. This type of situation, he's seen many times in gangs. Thus, joining the shelter is for life, leaving the shelter is for death. Any other questions? Lin Yi looked at everyone again. "If we find family or friends, can they join our shelter?" a girl named Oriana asked. "As long as they agree to the contract terms and can work well. Then." Another girl raised her hand. Nobody knew how much time passed until Lin Yi's stomach growled, signaling he had finally answered all the questions. Lin Yi clapped his hands, indicating it was officially time to eat. And so, everyone feasted heartily in this zombie-free and plunderer-free place. There was fish, meat, fruits, vegetables, and even alcohol on the table. Everyone ate to their heart's content, their stomachs nearly bursting. The next day, like usual, Chen Yui woke up early. She first washed some potatoes, fetched water from the pond, and then started preparing breakfast on the gas stove. While cooking, as usual, she prepared to wake up Lin Yi. At this time, a girl named Martha was crawling out of the tent. Seeing Chen Yui heading to Lin Yi's tent, she softly called, "Good morning, Yui. You're busy already?" "Good morning, Martha." Chen Yui flashed a bright smile. "More people now, so I have to get up early to make breakfast. Yesterday morning, I saw you enter the boss's tent. You stayed in there for about half an hour. And now you're going there again this morning." Hearing Martha's words, Chen Yui's face turned beet red. Martha quickly said, "Don't get me wrong, I didn't mean anything by it. I just feel a bit useless, you know. I only know how to do things a wife should do." So, Chen Yui was a bit confused, not understanding Martha's intention. Martha hesitated and, choosing her words carefully, said, "If you don't want to do those things, I can replace you. I'm not a loose woman, it's just... well, my parents have groomed me from a young age to be a proper wife." Chen Yui instinctively glanced at Martha. She had to admit, this girl in front of her was indeed very beautiful. Chapter 24, Expanding Farmland. Martha was a Russian girl, petite and delicate, with golden hair casually draped over her shoulders. She had a pinkish oval face, her skin was as white as snow, so smooth it was impossible to find a single flaw. Martha proposed that she wanted to replace Lin Yi in the task of waking the boss. Chen Yui responded with a smile, "I do it willingly, I just hope the boss can start every day full of vitality. I must go now, could you watch the stewed potatoes for me, okay?" "Okay, Sister Yui." Half an hour later, Lin Yi was successfully woken up. After that, everyone sat together for breakfast, which included potatoes with skins, tea, and biscuits. "Dhuan, Louis, today we need to go to the Louvre for a trade. Pack the potatoes into a few backpacks, each carrying 90 pounds. "Got it, boss," the two immediately responded. "Ladies, today I'm giving you a day off, take a good rest. Tomorrow I'll buy 4 plots of land, and then we'll work hard together." "That's great, boss." The girls cheered excitedly. After breakfast, old Mark approached Lin Yi. This biologist rarely sought him out on his own, so he must have discovered something new this time. "Do you have any news to tell me?" Lin Yi put down a book he was holding and poured him a cup of tea. "I found 2 drugs in the files of the Rebirth Project. One of them is called LL0B1, it's particularly rare, and seems to have very high test value in some aspect," the professor said as he handed Lin Yi a note with the names of the 2 drugs written on it. Lin Yi nodded, indicating he would keep an eye out for them. Then, he went with Dhuan, Louis, and the potatoes ready for trade. After carefully checking the residential building's resting point, they left the shelter and headed for the trading market at the Louvre. This trade went exceptionally smoothly. The merchant simply weighed the goods and handed 400 coins to Lin Yi. "Here are your coins." The merchant beamed, looking much better than before. Clearly, the previous 90 pounds of potatoes sold quite well. "I need your help. I'm looking for 2 drugs called CLL0B1 and Apulin Z10. If you can find them, I won't treat you poorly. I've never heard of these 2 drugs before, but I'll ask around," the merchant said, while noting down the names in his notebook. After the transaction ended, Lin Yi didn't rush back, but instead went with Dhuan and Louis to a tavern on the first floor. He knew well that part of the 90 pounds of potatoes sold last time would end up here. Sure enough, shortly after sitting down, Lin Yi saw 2 burly men not far away. They were drinking cheap wine, eating boiled potatoes and canned tuna, chatting animatedly. "Did you really trade coins for potatoes?" A middle-aged man drank half a glass of wine, full of doubt. "These potatoes are not ordinary. Try them." The other middle-aged man handed over the boiled potatoes in front of them. He explained to his companion, "After eating them, you can quickly restore physical strength, wounds heal faster, and you can last a long time without getting hungry." "Nonsense. How can there be such magical potatoes? Why don't you try it?" "All right." The middle-aged man drank all his wine in one gulp, biting into the potato, slowly savoring it. In an instant, his eyes widened in amazement. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, holding a chunk of potato in his hand. Magical or not, the taste was simply fabulous. "Brother, what is the price for these potatoes?" The middle-aged man who had tasted the potato asked eagerly. 2 pounds of potatoes for 5 coins, you can buy them at the third merchant on the street. Wait here, I'm going to buy 20 pounds first. Lin Yi stroked his chin, watching the middle-aged man, who was in a hurry, run out of the tavern, heading towards the street. At that moment, Lin Yi understood. The merchants only took a 10% profit, which was reasonable and helpful for long-term sales. Lin Yi then returned with his team to the residential building near the Louvre. The door to this building was particularly strong, and only he had the key. As a result, it had practically become his fixed resting place. However, when Lin Yi returned to the shelter, a large group of people appeared, surrounded the building in the blink of an eye. At the front of the crowd, a man dressed in camouflage clothes with closed eyes said, "He went in." It was obvious he was using a skill. Beads of sweat covered his forehead, his expression tense, fully concentrated. "There's nothing in that building, not even a zombie. Are you sure your skill didn't fail?" Another man in camouflage asked. He held a modern assault rifle with a scope, which he was using as a telescope. The first man opened his eyes. "I don't know. He might possess some disguise skills." Then continue the ambush. Number 1, Number 6, move into that building and take a favorable position. Report anything immediately. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Inside the shelter. Lin Yi clicked the purchase button. A special field of medium size instantly appeared by the pond. In the following days, life was uneventful. Lin Yi read books and relaxed while others worked in the fields, exhausted and sore. In the morning, Lin Yi would leave to sell potatoes, while others harvested crops and planted new ones. When the harvest ended, Lin Yi's farmers had gathered a full 2 tons of potatoes. By this time, the shelter had a total of 420 square meters of potato planting fields, but Lin Yi wasn't satisfied, spending another 400 coins to buy a medium-sized field. For these 13 people, managing nearly 500 square meters of fields every day was truly arduous. His good employees weren't exactly thrilled about it. After all, this was a special field. Despite its modest size, the whole process of sowing, fertilizing, and harvest needed to be completed within 3 days. And it required a cycle every 3 days. Thankfully, Lin Yi, the foreman, expressed that he wouldn't increase the fields anytime soon, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. On this day, after selling some potatoes, Lin Yi didn't immediately return to the base. Following a lead from the girls, he set out to find another survivor camp. Sacred Heart Cathedral. This camp was not on good terms with the Louvre. Because the Louvre considered itself the sole official authority representative of Paris, but this camp totally disregarded them, refusing to follow their orders. Still, Lin Yi decided to take the risk and visit the camp. As he got further from the Louvre, zombies became more frequent, and their numbers increased. Seeing 6 sluggish zombies gathered together ahead, Lin Yi didn't want to waste energy on them and planned to avoid them altogether. Just as he brushed past them, one zombie suddenly lashed out with its claws. It was disguised. This zombie was incredibly fast, tearing Lin Yi's t-shirt to shreds with one swipe. If Lin Yi hadn't dodged in time, his chest would have been torn open. It seemed these creatures were continuously evolving. Lin Yi quickly drew his one-handed sword, slicing off its head. But then, 3 more zombies were attracted by the sounds of fighting. Not wanting to get entangled, Lin Yi sped up, running down the sidewalk. After running about half a mile, Lin Yi suddenly stopped, hiding behind a vehicle. Looking ahead, there was a whole group of zombies not far off. At least 1,000 of them. Chapter 25, Commercial Building Camp. What to do? Lin Yi was filled with helplessness. He wanted to explore another survivor's camp, but now, he was unexpectedly trapped. Currently, zombies are lunging toward him from behind, while in front, there's a horde of nearly 1,000 zombies. It's simply a dilemma. Grrr. Get lost. Lin Yi cursed and kicked away a zombie that jumped down from the window. He pulled out his sword and swiftly dealt with the paratrooper that fell from the sky. Suddenly, not far ahead, the sound of dense automatic weapon fire erupted. In the silent street, it was particularly abrupt. Lin Yi's spirit instantly lifted. As expected, the massive zombie horde began to be drawn toward the sound, and crazily rushed toward the north from where the gunfire came. The street, once crowded with zombies, suddenly emptied, leaving Lin Yi with an opportunity. He could seize this chance and decisively escape from this perilous place. But Lin Yi hesitated inwardly. His goal was to find another survivor camp. What if the gunfire came from people in that camp? Should I take the risk and check it out, or just head back now? Lin Yi waged an inner battle. Grrr. At this moment, another zombie silently approached, trying to bite him. Shut up, let me think. Lin Yi, extremely irritated, kicked it away. After pondering for a long time, he took out a coin from his pocket and threw it hard into the air. Heads or tails? If it's heads, I'll go. If tails, I won't. Damn, it's heads. Lin Yi had recently been lazy, and hoped for tails so he could logically return to the shelter. But since fate decided this way, he gritted his teeth and kicked hard toward the zombie crowd. It took less than 10 minutes. Lin Yi found the source of the gunfire. A fierce battle was taking place around a 20-story commercial building. Thousands of zombies surged like tides, repeatedly attacking the reinforced building, clawing, roaring. Inside the building, dozens of assault rifles and machine guns were desperately resisting, gun barrels spewing tongues of flame, and bullets falling like raindrops into the zombie horde. However, the noise of the battle acted like a giant magnet, attracting more zombies. This undoubtedly created a vicious cycle. Roar. Suddenly, an unusually strong zombie roared out from the crowd. It fiercely swung its paw, bang. A metallic railing on the window was knocked off. Immediately, two strangely shaped mutant zombies jumped in. Screams of terror and increasingly desperate gunfire came from within the building. Fortunately, a machine gun soon appeared at the window, unleashing powerful firepower that shot holes through several zombies' heads. At the same time, someone quickly brought a metal plate, and a few people welded it over the broken window. In the blink of an eye, the breach was repaired as good as new. These people are quite professional. Lin Yi watched all of this with amazement, admiring their proficient response to zombie attacks, clearly seasoned by countless battles. He took a closer look and saw survivors rushing out of the building, wielding baseball bats, swords, and homemade long spears. Facing the remaining zombies, they showed no fear and swiftly dealt with them. After observing for a while, Lin Yi felt the timing was right and decided to try contacting them. He stood up from behind the car, waved his sword, swiftly dispatched a few sluggish zombies, and headed toward the building. A sharp-eyed member of the cleanup team noticed the lone Lin Yi and shouted alertly, "Stop! Who are you?" Lin Yi straightforwardly said, "I intend to trade with your camp." At this moment, a man who looked weathered by time came over. He said suspiciously, "Trade? What makes you think you have something we need?" Lin Yi smiled confidently, "Everyone has needs. Go get someone who can negotiate with me. Stay put here and don't play tricks." The man yelled at his companion to keep a close eye on Lin Yi, the stranger. Then, he ran off to discuss with their leader. In less than 3 minutes, the man returned with a man in his 40s with a scarred face. The scarred man wore an eye patch over his left eye, had a massive scar on the right side of his face, and exuded a fierce aura. He glanced sidelong at Lin Yi, his tone filled with threat and ridicule. "Are you a merchant? You don't seem to have any goods on you. Are you here to sell your ass?" He. Lin Yi didn't care about the man's disdain. He calmly and swiftly, like a magician, took a cooked potato from his bag and tossed it casually to the man. "Potato?" The scarred man was first stunned, then instinctively caught it. Next, he suspiciously examined the potato meticulously. Seeing this, his eyes widened in amazement. What was going on? In the apocalypse, with soil heavily polluted, how could he see such a fresh potato? Could it be? His mind raced with guesses as he squinted at Lin Yi again. Lin Yi nodded earnestly. "My people have mastered special skills to not only grow vegetables but also purify water. And the vegetables we've cultivated are nutritious and even have some healing properties." The scarred man hesitantly bit into the potato and slowly chewed. Tasting this, his eyes instantly lit up, filled with shock and disbelief. The taste was like nothing he'd ever experienced in the apocalypse. Even more surprising, his body aches from the recent battle faded considerably. At this moment, the scarred man dared not underestimate Lin Yi. He looked intently at Lin Yi. "Why should I trust that you'll trade such precious goods with us?" Lin Yi replied calmly, "An hour later, I'll bring 90 pounds of potatoes, and you can check their quality yourself." "All right. What do you want in exchange?" "Survivor coin, 1 pound of potatoes for 2.5 coins. The scarred man thought for a moment and said, "That's a particular demand. If your potatoes are of this quality, we can make this deal." "Deal." Lin Yi said crisply, waved his hand, and turned to leave. Watching Lin Yi's departing figure, the seasoned man approached the scarred man and asked, "Commander, do you really believe him? If what he says is true, then it would be a timely rain for us. You know the tough situation we're facing." The scarred man replied gravely. After leaving the commercial building, Lin Yi cautiously watched out for zombies while searching for a secure entry point to the shelter. After walking for about 5 minutes and chopping off the heads of 3 zombies, he finally found a suitable residential building. Just as he entered the residential building, a sudden thought flashed in Lin Yi's mind. He turned back, grabbed a zombie's corpse, and brought it back to the shelter. Afterward, Lin Yi arrived at the mysterious pit and without hesitation threw the zombie body in. Chapter 26, Sacred Heart Cathedral. Lin Yi threw the zombie's corpse into the bottomless pit of the shelter with force. Just after he tossed it, A prompt sounded in his mind. Bottomless pit has processed biological material. The shelter gained 10 units of biomatter. Great. Seeing this, Lin Yi was overjoyed. Unexpectedly, even the useless zombie corpses could be exchanged for biomatter. He immediately called Dhuan over and instructed him. From time to time, he would bring back some zombie corpses, and Dhuan was responsible for throwing them into the bottomless pit. Now, help me prepare some potatoes. I've found a new buyer. Got it, boss. The young man was flushed with excitement, full of vigor. An hour later, with a backpack full of potatoes, Lin Yi once again arrived at the survivor camp of the commercial building. During his absence, this camp had undergone some significant changes. Some areas had been cleared of zombies and debris, and dozens of people were busily at work. Some people were transporting zombie corpses to be burned, others were meticulously collecting shell casings, hurriedly repairing damaged defensive works. A camp guard, sharp-eyed, spotted Lin Yi and immediately ran inside to report to the leader. Soon, the scar-faced, one-eyed middle-aged man strode out of the camp. Seeing Lin Yi, he asked, "You really brought the potatoes?" "That's right. If you're unsure, you can cook and taste them right here. I'll leave the potatoes here, and I'll come back to collect the coins after you've verified them," Lin Yi said, placing the potato bag steadily on the ground. After a moment's thought, Lin Yi asked, "Do you know a place called Sacred Heart Church, or something along those lines?" What's it called?" "So, you were originally heading to the Sacred Heart Cathedral for trading?" The scar-faced leader raised an eyebrow. "Yes, I have a considerable amount, so I need several stable trading channels. I can have someone show you a safe route. We often cooperate with them too." The scar-faced leader waved over a subordinate. It was a young guy in camouflage. The scar-faced leader pointed to Lin Yi and commanded, "Take this gentleman to the Sacred Heart Cathedral." "Yes, Commander." The young guy immediately stood up straight and saluted. Lin Yi observed the young man, noting that he had a sharp knife and a pistol at his belt, with a solid baseball bat slung over his back. He recognized this young man as one of the soldiers at the forefront when fighting the zombie horde earlier. At this moment, Lin Yi had a slight understanding. This scar-faced leader sent such a skilled person to guide him, obviously valuing the stable trade with him, which was just perfect. Lin Yi nodded to the scar-faced man as a gesture of thanks, and then set off with the young guide. Leaving the commercial building camp, the guide lowered his voice and reminded Lin Yi with a serious look, "Be careful from now on, because the farther from the Seine River, the more dangerous it gets." Initially, Lin Yi was confused until he heard the explanation, and then he understood. It turns out that zombies don't like to be near rivers. Now, large groups of zombies have started migrating southward of the Seine River. Many professional camps are trying to blow up bridges and trap the zombies on the opposite bank. "There's a group of zombies ahead, so we'll take the sewer, it'll be safer this way." With those words, the guide fetched a crowbar and, with some effort, opened a manhole cover underneath a marked car. Soon, both of them had turned on their flashlights and were moving through the dark but nearly dry sewer. The pungent smell here made one want to retch, but it was much better than being chased by thousands of zombies. Here, Lin Yi saw rats bigger than cats, fearlessly facing humans. A few rats gathered together, gnawing on the rotting meat of several corpses, creating a rather ghastly scene. Lin Yi shone his flashlight into the rats' eyes, finding them pitch black, with no sign of mutation. Does the virus not affect them? Animals aren't infected, but their behavior changes somewhat. For example, dogs have started to band together and hunt solitary zombies. Hearing this, Lin Yi stroked his chin, secretly moved. Even in the apocalypse, dogs still guard humans. About an hour later, the two reached their destination. The guide pointed to a manhole cover going upward and indicated to Lin Yi that above was the Sacred Heart Cathedral. He asked, "Can you find your way back, or do you need me to wait here for you?" "No need, thank you. Here's something for your trouble." Lin Yi took out 2 chocolate bars and handed them to the guide. The guide accepted them, thanked him, and turned to leave. Lin Yi waited until his figure disappeared around a corner before opening the manhole cover and climbing up. Unexpectedly, the first thing he saw upon sticking his head out was the barrel of a rifle aimed right at his face. The rifle was held by a sleazy-looking man in camouflage. He sat comfortably in a chair, aiming the rifle at Lin Yi, looking very hostile. "Little rat, where did you come from?" "I'm here for a trade." Lin Yi remained unfazed by the dark barrel of the gun, casually emerging from the sewer. The guide took him through a secure route, so this path must be known to people from both camps. He didn't believe the man would dare to shoot carelessly. The gunman eyed Lin Yi's calm demeanor, instinctively licking his lips. He didn't lower his gun but instead deliberately laughed loudly. "I don't see you carrying any goods. What are you selling, yourself? I bet someone would definitely like you." Realizing the man's inappropriate gaze, Lin Yi immediately spat, "Cut it out, I like women. Who's in charge here? Where can I find them?" "The one responsible for supplies is Emmanuel, he's in the artificial garden now," the old man in the straw hat. "Thanks." Lin Yi nodded and then walked towards the Sacred Heart Cathedral. The cathedral had been transformed into a fortress, encompassing surrounding areas. Nearby open fields housed a shanty town, surrounded by walls built from stacked cars, buses, and construction debris. Though unsightly, they looked very sturdy. This was clearly a large survivor camp with at least thousands of people. No wonder they dared to rival the Louvre camp. With so many people, finding the straw-hatted old man, Emmanuel, was no easy task. Reluctantly, Lin Yi asked a few guards. Following their directions, he finally found him. At this time, the old man was in a garden, feebly studying plant soils. "Are you Emmanuel?" Lin Yi stepped forward. "Hold on just a second," the old man said, focused on measuring plants and taking notes. He was in his 50s, dressed like a gardener, with a neatly trimmed little mustache. As he straightened his body, there was a clicking sound from his back, clearly indicating that frequent bending was taking a toll on his aging body. Lin Yi asked again, "Are you in charge of the camp's trading?" Chapter 27, Negotiating the Deal Inside the Sacred Heart Cathedral. Lin Yi walked steadily to Emmanuel, reached out his hand, and spoke straight to the point. "I'm Lin Yi, planning to trade with your camp, and they told me to come to you." "Then you've found the right person. I'm the only one here authorized to do business with outsiders. I'm also in charge of distributing supplies and equipment." Emmanuel shook hands with Lin Yi, wearing a professional smile on his face. Then he wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked Lin Yi up and down. "You're an Asian? What kind of business do you want to conduct?" "I have a large amount of food," Lin Yi succinctly replied. "That's great. What do you want to exchange for it with us?" Emmanuel's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise, motioning for Lin Yi to walk with him as they talked. "I'm very interested in survivor coins, exchanging 1 pound of food for 2.5 coins. "Oh? Are you sure?" Emmanuel looked at Lin Yi in astonishment, somewhat incredulous. His thoughts drifted back to when the apocalypse first descended, when vending machines were still visible everywhere. However, there were very few who could kill zombies to earn coins. Now, the number of professionals has increased, but vending machines have vanished without a trace, becoming a legend. Seeing Lin Yi only smile without explaining why he wanted coins, Emmanuel wisely realized it was not his place to ask further. So he nodded and asked, "We agree to your price, but how much food do you have?" "That's hard to say, but I can guarantee that if the cooperation is stable, your camp with thousands of people won't have to worry about the food supply anymore." Lin Yi spoke with firm confidence. His commanding words and demeanor made Emmanuel stop in his tracks. The old man held his breath, paused, and then couldn't help but ask, "You wouldn't have robbed the Paris grain depot, would you?" At this time, the two were on the plaza of the Sacred Heart Cathedral. Lin Yi looked up and saw the Sava bell atop the 84-meter-high bell tower. It's said to be the largest bell in the world. An evil thought suddenly flashed through Lin Yi's mind. If there were ever a conflict with this camp, I must climb the bell tower and strike this bell hard. Surely, by then, the zombies of the whole of Paris would madly storm this place like a tidal wave.